turn that down a bit, hang on. Hello, everybody. Hi. So, the schedule did say that we were going to play The Way We All Go. Chat, I've 100%ed that game before. Like, I wouldn't be playing it on stream fresh and fun, and I just think I would get really bored. So, we're not going to play that one. Oops. But, to make up for it, we're going to play another Ebihime horror piece. It's one of her more recent ones. It just came out, I think it was a couple months ago. Like, very recent. Hang on. I think it was released for like a game jam. No, it wasn't a game jam game. It was just one she wanted to make. That's okay. That's good too. That's good too. We love that kind of game. It's called Her Love Bite Like Poison. This might be a really short stream, and I kind of need it to be short, guys. So our beautiful Princess Hine, queen of the channel, perfect little girl, she woke me up at 4 a.m. absolutely caterwauling, yowling, screeching, sounding like she was having her fucking throat cut, you know, the whole shebang. And so I got woken up at 4 a.m. And she was kicking up a fuss because there was a cat using her garden as a shortcut. Like, she's in an enclosed cashier area, so she couldn't get to the cash and beat it up herself, so she was just screaming at it the whole time. And so I came out and scared it off, and she was really happy about that. She loved that. She thought that was brilliant. But I'm really tired now. Oops. So I didn't want to cancel stream at so late notice. But this might be a really short one. That's okay. We have fun anyway, you know? But this game, yes, it's called Her Love Like Poison. And I haven't played it before at all, and I'm really excited to play it with you all. Oh, I love this art already. Ethel Briggs was trying to play the second movement of Mozart's Violin Sonata number 21. But she wasn't having much luck. It had been months since she'd last picked up her violin, and the lack of practice had made her rusty. She had played this particular piece numerous times, and not for any competitions. She'd always been too shy to enter any despite Miss Manderley's gentle coaxing, but for her own satisfaction. Mozart's Violin Sonata 21 was one of her favourites. Ethel wasn't a huge Mozart aficionado. She didn't like how upbeat most of Pete's pieces were, how frothy, flippant, and inoffensive. On the whole, she thought that Mozart was far too cheerful. Ethel much preferred the quiet, understated melancholy of Beethoven or Chopin's clean, precise compositions. But there was something special about the Violin Sonata 21. This one was one of Mozart's few sonatas in E minor, composed in Paris shortly after his mother's death. What the fuck? What is that? Hang on. Oh, okay. Sorry, so there was a pop-up and I was confused. Not with the game, just on my desktop. The first part was Allegro, and it contained some of that familiar energy which was so distinctly Mozart, but the second was far more moving. The second movement of Mozart's Violin Sonata 21 had a special place in Ethel's heart, mainly because this was one of the first violin pieces she had heard. It was this piece which had inspired her to take up the violin in the first place. Ethel had wanted to be able to play this melancholy piece with her own two hands, to bring this ethereal, haunting music into the world of her own volition. For many years, Ethel had attended her violin classes dutifully, and for a while she had accomplished her goal. She had performed this piece often enough that her muscle memory could make up for her lack of practice. But though Ethel knew she had the notes mostly correct wasn't good enough. Oh, girl, I know that feeling. Oh. That perfectionist streak. It's a problem. Ethel's right hand slipped, the bow scraping unpleasantly against the strings, and she winced. She had been at it for some 5 minutes, trying to recreate her past successes. But this was the final straw. What was the point in pursuing this any further? It wasn't as though she was performing this for an audience. She was at home on her own, and this was a blessing. If her parents and her 2 younger brothers had been there, Ethel wouldn't have been able to play her once beloved violin at all. They all would have told her to knock it off. Apart from Rowan, maybe. Rowan had always been kind. Or maybe he, unlike the other members of Ethel's family, was simply too self-conscious to say what he actually thought. Maybe Rowan looked down on Ethel too for her strange, lonely, old-fashioned hobbies. Ethel's family didn't really care for classical music. Her father, Jude, liked it on Maiden, Dio, and Judas Priest. Liked Iron Maiden, Dio, and Judas Priest, while her mother, Lauren, listened to anything that was trending on TikTok. Manny, meanwhile, listened to loud, shouty music, and Ethel didn't know what Rowan liked because he never told anybody. Rowan was very secretive about his interests, almost furtive. If her family had listened to classical music, however, Ethel knew they would have preferred Mozart to Beethoven and Chopin. Mozart seemed like exactly the sort of person Lauren would have enjoyed, chatting with over a pint, come to think of it. If the Mozart in Amadeus was at all like the real man. Ethel sighed. She was disappointed in herself. She hadn't been playing the violin for very long, but her jaw was aching and her fingers were already beginning to hurt. She's so cute. Look at her. Look at her design. It's adorable. Oh, I love lovely little cute little girl. She's going to have a terrible time, I just know it. Gloomily, she set her violin down. Glumly, she looked at it lying on her bed. Her eyes softened in such a way that she looked rather like an abandoned puppy. Then, feeling rather sad and sorry for herself, she sniffed. She had loved that violin once, but her love had long since dwindled. Everything which had once brought Ethel joy had become grey and faded, since Clementine had left her. Oh no! Your wifey broke up with you? I'm sorry. No wonder you're so dour. What did her love for music matter now? Had it ever mattered? Ethel was already 21, and simultaneously she was only 21. She was in her final year of university. The adult world loomed before her. Rather than welcoming it, however, Ethel found herself shrinking away from her future responsibilities. That was probably why she had dug out her old violin, to play through her favourite piece from her childhood. She had been trying to cling to the past. She simply didn't want to grow up. Ethel sat down on her bed, defeated. Though she supposed it wasn't her bed anymore. It hadn't been for almost 3 years. When Ethel was at university in Durham, Manny slept in what had once been her room. When Ethel came back for the holidays, Manny and Rowan were forced to share a room, something they both resented. I know it's a tight squeeze, she'd always said, but try to bear with it. Ethel can't be expected to share with either of you. She's the oldest and she's a young lady. She needs her space. Don't be surly. Rowan was good-natured enough that he didn't complain about his sleeping arrangement. Not too much. Too much. Not to Ethel's face, at least. But Manny was less so. Manny was only 13 and he hadn't learned how to be tactful yet. Ethel's youngest brother had been in an awful mood at all Christmas. A mood which Ethel knew was largely because of her unwanted presence. Oh my god. She's prime material for a toxic Yuri to happen. This is terrible. Also, look at the mouse cursor, guys. It's a mushroom. It's a mushroom. Isn't that cool? It had been a relief when her family had left the days prior for Luton Airport for the holiday they'd been looking forward to so much. Now that Manny was no longer skulking around, shooting her nasty glares whenever their paths crossed, Ethel felt like she could finally breathe. Some small parts of Ethel wished that she'd accompanied her family. She'd never been to Australia before and she was curious about it. But another part of her thought she'd made the right move. She didn't want to keep subjecting Manny to her company. She also enjoyed having the house to herself. That meant she could play the violin without having to worry about the sound carrying. And it did carry in her parents' home since the walls were so thin. Ethel had been looking forward to being on her own, but now that she was on her own, she couldn't even enjoy her newfound freedom. What was wrong with her? Ethel bit the inside of her cheek, weighing up her options. If she couldn't play her violin, she should at least give her thesis a go. The due date to hand the damn thing in was approaching. She only had 2 months left to work on it, but she'd not written a single line of it yet. Oh no, 2 months! And oh, no line, and you haven't written any of it? Oh, that's dangerous. She couldn't bring herself to. Girl! Like the violin, Ethel had lost all interest in her thesis and in her degree. Oh no. Ethel had used her thesis as an excuse to get out of going on holiday with her parents. She told them she needed to focus on her work, but she'd been doing precious little work all day and wasting an awful lot of time. Ethel glanced at her violin, which lay discarded on her bed. Then she sighed for the upteenth time that night. How had things come to this? What had happened to make her lose interest in everything which had once delighted her, especially her beloved violin? Girlie, that's called depression. Like, when I'm depressed, nothing brings me joy. Nothing. It's fucked up. It's what it is. Yes, I'm opening the energy drink chat. I want to make sure I sound somewhat alive. Unwilling girls might have been coerced into playing instruments by their parents, but this hadn't been the case with Ethel. Ethel had been introduced to the world of classical music quite by chance, after discovering an old CD full of this stuff in a jumble sale for 50 pence. She had been drawn to the old crack CD because of the smiley lady on the cover, and she hadn't been too interested in the music itself. When she had listened to that CD, however, she had experienced a revelation. The songs had spoken to her. She had been instantly drawn into the world of classical music, and it had all been thanks to Mozart's Violin Sonata No. 21. Ethel had known after listening to that CD that her life would never be the same again. Shortly after, she had pleaded with her parents to take her to violin lessons so she could play just as well as the smiley lady with the pixie cut on the cover of that CD. Oh my god, it's my favourite bad bitch. Hi, Hydra! We're reading, Toxic Yuri, but with a fungal twist. Not like that, but like mushrooms. You know, you get it. Ethel had since lost that life-altering CD. She had lost many things which were important to her over the years, but she could remember the cover clearly. The woman had been pretty, despite her unconventional haircut, decidedly feminine in her blue drap dress and her dangly earrings. She had beheld her violin against the nook of her neck, and in her other hand she had wielded a bow. There had been something commanding about the nameless woman in blue, despite how skinny she had been, how slender her arms and legs. To the young Ethel, she had seemed less like a person and more like a queen from a fairy tale, the garland of flowers on her head only adding to this illusion. Ethel hadn't necessarily wanted to play the violin for the sake of it. She had just wanted to look like the nameless lady on the album's cover, a lady who Ethel now realised probably hadn't played any of the songs arranged on that CD. The woman on that cover had probably been a model, brought into a studio to pose with a violin she couldn't play. That, or she had been a stock image lifted from the internet. When Ethel had grown up enough to realise this, it had sullied the mystique of that seminal CD. A little like how other children feel betrayed after learning Santa wasn't real. Just got back from the gym, so I'm going to make some dinner, but I'm listening to your wonderful voice in the background, darling. Thank you, I appreciate it. What are you having for dinner? It had been an eye-opening moment, but maybe it had been for the best. This revelation had lessened Ethel's pain, at least, when the CD had gone missing a few years ago. Fish, rice and kimchi? Oh, that does sound nice. Eat well. Good stuff. In any case, Ethel's violin lessons had never quite lived up to her expectations. Ethel had kept at the violin, carried by her initial childish enthusiasm, but her enthusiasm had faded when she started secondary school, and she realised that she would never be as smiley or as happy as the elfin woman on that CD cover. She would never be that pretty either. No amount of playing the violin could bring Ethel close to her idealised image of perfection, something which became all the more apparent when Shania and her gang had decided to bully her. Ethel grew so disenchanted with the violin she gave up on her lessons at the start of year 11. She had needed to focus on her GCSEs anyway, and it hadn't helped that she had jammed her fingers during a netball game in PE, and it had hurt for a whole month to hold her bow. Jude had never liked it when she played the violin in the house anyway, especially when there was a big game on. Manny, meanwhile, had always said her scraping sounded unbearable. "It's like nails on a chalkboard, can't you pack it in?" Manny used to say, and in the end, Ethel did just that. She packed the violin in, but not for good. She continued to play here and there, when her parents and her brothers were out of the house and there was nobody to hear her. Sometimes Ethel even took joy in her playing, but these moments had been few and far between. Once, Ethel had played the violin dedicatedly once a week at her teacher's, Miss Manderley. Now she played once a month of that, and she did so furtively, as if it were a shameful secret. Ethel couldn't help but feel embarrassed as she played, as though she was performing an obscene act, even more intimate than masturbation. Maybe playing the violin was masturbation in a sense, because it had only ever brought her pleasure. Nobody else in her life had cared to listen to her. Nobody except dear old Miss Manderley. She had been encouraging. But what had this brought Ethel? Wait, huh? Ebihime loves her funny metaphors. Her poetry. Ethel left her violin on the bed and approached the window, her footsteps muffled like a cat's quiet padding. Once there, she stood at the sill and glanced out at the window at the garden beyond. Next time I see someone play the violin, I'm going to call the cops. Oh no! Indecent perverts! Oh no! It was late at night. The digital clock on her bedside table said it was already 20:30. What the fuck is that? I don't do military time. Hang on. What is that? I'm looking it up. That's military time, right? Oh, it's 8:30 p.m. Okay. I've never understood military time. It's so annoying. And it always pops up in the worst places. And the sky was navy blue, the moon ringed by wisps of cloud. Guys, I have to say, the art in this is exceptional. Absolutely stunning. Like, look at this. Look at this background right here. This should be in a fucking museum. Like, this is crazy. There was a bit of a breeze outside, and the darkened silhouettes of the hedgerows were shaking. Ethel's fingers curled around the windowsill. All of a sudden, being inside felt stifling. Ethel had been so caught up in her memories, she worried they would overwhelm her. Newly uneasy, Ethel took an anxious step away from the window. She wasn't sure why, but she had an intense desire to escape. She had to clear the cobwebs from her mind in some way, and what better way to do that than to go for a walk? It might have been late at night. It was too late to go for a wander, really, but she did live in Oxbury. Oxbury was a tiny village, almost minuscule, really, with a nigh on non-existent crime rate. Nothing bad ever happened there. Those are the places where bad things always happen. Hello? People just don't talk about it. The bad things are happening all the time. People just don't talk about it. That's how it works. No stabbings ever took place in Oxbury, contrary to the wild claims Americans on the internet like to make about the UK's crime statistics. Or any muggings. Ethel would be just fine. Why wouldn't she be? Oxbury was so safe and sterile it bordered on the boring. Hadn't she always wanted to go on fun adventures when she was a little girl? Adventure was hardly going to come and find her if she only remained indoors, steeped in her reminiscences as if she were a teabag. Ethel didn't imagine that anything exciting would happen on her walk, but it would be better than sitting inside and stewing. Ethel padded downstairs, her feet sinking against the cushioned landing, then the cushioned steps of the staircase, and paused by the front door. She eyed her old coat, but ultimately left it be. It was a brown duffel coat which Ethel had owned since sixth form. The coat had been in active service for 4 long winters, and the passage of time had taken its toll. One of the toggles of the coat was missing. It had snapped clean off, and the brown furry fabric was worn and threadbare in places, like a beloved teddy bear which had been cuddled one too many times. Lauren had tutted when Ethel had come home from university clad in that natty coat, and shaken her head. "You're still wearing that old thing?" she'd asked, her voice incredulous. "I thought you would have brought a new coat by now. You look like you've come straight out of a jumble sale." Ethel knew that her mother hadn't meant this as a compliment. Ethel's mother rarely complimented her appearance. Wow, her family fucking sucks. Justice for Ethel. Her family is evil. Well, except for her little brother. One of her brothers seems okay. We don't know anything much about her dad. But her mum? Her mum is horrible. I don't like this. I'm angry. Justice for Ethel. But she had liked it nonetheless. Lauren had often taken Ethel to jumble sales when she was a girl, ostensibly to find some cheap bits and pieces for their newly renovated kitchen, but actually so she could have a natter with her friends. Lauren would stand by Auntie Jeannie and Auntie Morella's stalls. They weren't real aunties, of course, they were just her mother's friends. While Ethel would wander around by herself, transfixed by all the wares on display. The jumble sale her mother had frequented every weekend had taken place in the car park of the big Sainsbury's in Wrexham, and all sorts of people were in attendance. It hadn't just been Auntie Jeannie who sold old paperbacks, which had once belonged to her mother, and Auntie Mariella who sold soap and candles. There's always a woman selling soap and candles. There's always a woman selling soap and candles every time. Go to a market and try and, count how many people are selling soap and candles and things like that. There's, more than one sometimes. It's crazy. There is not an indefinite market for soap and candles, my girls. There had been other, more interesting vendors with piercings and sad tattoos. Some of these vendors sold bits of wood whittled into fantastical creatures, self-painted dioramas of forests and fairy tale castles, handmade jewellery set with stones, which couldn't have been precious but which were shone regardless, and beaded dream catchers which swayed in the breeze. Their wares made Auntie Jeannie's old paperbacks and Auntie Mariella's soaps and candles look very pedestrian indeed. Well, yes, they would. They're actually interesting. Ethel had always loved jumble sales, in part because there had been so much stuff to gawp at. They'd been so busy, Ethel had been unable to melt into the crowds, completely anonymous. Ethel had quite liked being told she looked like she had come straight from one of those sales, though her mother had been less than impressed. Lauren had told her that her coat made her look mousy, but that was what Ethel preferred. She had never liked standing out. Maybe that was why she had chosen to venture outdoors at such a late hour. There wouldn't be anybody in the street to spot her. The coat really was too ratty to keep wearing, however. Ethel left it be, reasoning her jacket would be enough. Ethel did grab her father's old torch from his toolbox box, though, however, just in case she needed it. She stuffed it inside a canvas bag, which she slung over her shoulder. Oh, that's another lovely background, my goodness. Then she stepped out onto the street. She shut the front door behind her, and soon enough she was enveloped by the shadows. She hoped she would be able to wander the streets uninterrupted. Well now, this is a coincidence. It's been a while. Ethel, isn't it? but her hopes were soon scuppered. Oh no, who's out at this hour? Oh, it's, oh no, that's actually, Hey, men, masculine presenting peoples, don't approach women in the middle of the night. Don't do it. It's scary. It's quite ominous. There was a man on the other side of the road, a man who looked almost as washed out as Ethel. It was hard to see in the dark, even with the street lamps illuminating the grey, gloomy pavement, but Ethel recognised the man well enough. He must have been in his 50s now, but he'd been younger when Ethel had first met him. 31? 32? She wasn't sure. Oh, thank you for the hydrate! He had a lined face which spoke of his encroaching age, though it was lined in such a way that traces of the young man he'd once been could still be seen. His jaw was still firm, his nose aquiline, and his eyes were striking. Aquiline? What does that mean? It's describing the nose, but that doesn't tell me anything. Aquiline. Or hooked or curved like an eagle's beak. I see. The man had a full head of hair despite his age, and it was more sandy brown than grey, shot through with only a few lighter strands. He wasn't a bad-looking man, he was definitely no monster. But Ethel still shrunk away from him. She knew him, but that did little to endear her to him. This was Mr. Browner, one of Ethel's teachers back in primary school. Oh God, no, not a teacher! Mr. Brown had been one of the few male teachers at Oxbury Primary. In fact, he might have been the only teacher. And he stood out not from the rest, not just because of his gender, but because of his sheer size. Hi Jackie, thank you for the hydrate. He had been a mountain of a man, so much so he'd had to stoop to enter and exit the classroom. He had been head and shoulders above Miss Pierce, Mrs. Spriggett, and Mrs. Moyles, quite literally. Ethel had always found Mr. Brown intimidating, what with his sheer vastness, not to mention his voice, which had been deep and booming. Ethel, granted, had been a good deal shorter herself back when she had been in primary school. But Mr. Brown didn't look any less intimidating over a decade later. Hi, Jackie. I hope you're having a good day. Ethel had grown while Mr. Brown had not, but he still eclipsed her. Mr. Brown was taller than Rowan, who had shot up when he had started secondary school, taller too than her father, who had played basketball when he was younger. He was easily taller than 6 feet. He could even have been pushing 7. Mr. Brown was a vast mountain of a man with large hands and large feet, whose coat seemed too small to contain him. Ethel had been afraid of Mr. Brown as a young girl, and little had changed. She was still afraid of him. Ethel shrunk back, shaking. What was Mr. Brown doing outside so very late? It was strange, but... Yip yip! The game did it for me, actually. Ah! That explained it. Yes, dogs like to go out for walks whenever they please. They probably needed to poop. He must have been walking his dog. Mr. Brown's dog was a curious sight. It was the polar opposite of its owner, small and runty, where Mr. Brown was tall and wide. The dog and the owner were so mismatched it was almost comical. The diminutive dog, was he a spaniel? Ethel wasn't sure. Was so tiny Ethel worried Mr. Brown might step on it by accident. Ethel hadn't known that Mr. Brown had a dog. She didn't know much about Mr. Brown at all. She hadn't thought about him in years. Was a spaniel? Yes, Ethel was sure that it was a spaniel. A new addition to his family? Well, whatever. It didn't really matter. Ethel? Ethel's shocked silence must have perturbed Mr. Brown because he sounded concerned when he said, You are Ethel, aren't you? Ethel Briggs? It's been a while since I saw you, but I remember you. I don't forget any of my students. Yes, I am Ethel. I'm, sorry? I thought as much. It's nice to know I'm not going completely senile. I take it you're back home from university then? Yes. You're going to Durham? Yes, did my parents tell you that? Aye, they did. Jude told me. Oh, Do you see my parents very much then? Oh, aye. We go to the pub quiz together sometimes in Wrexham. Your father can be very competitive. Ethel didn't disbelieve that. Jude had always been a bit of a know-it-all. He was the sort of man who liked to watch quiz shows solely so he could yell at the contestants for getting things wrong. And woe betide they loused up any questions on classic rock. That was Jude's specialty. Ethel couldn't imagine her mother joining in a pub quiz all that enthusiastically, but she probably went along for the drinks and peanuts. Ethel had been to the pub in Wrexham with her parents a couple of times, and Lauren got on rather well with the proprietor, old Jerry. He always made a show of IDing Lauren whenever she ordered a pint, though that wasn't really necessary. Lauren might have been young for a mother of three, and she took great pains to ensure her makeup was just so. But she was in her early 42. It was impossible that anybody might mistake her for a teenager, but Lauren still liked the attention. She thrived on it. I've been seeing quite a bit of your parents actually after Evie's funeral. Your mum helped me with the arrangements and with all of the refreshments. Her help was invaluable. Ah, now that sounded familiar. Ethel thought her mother might have mentioned at some point or another that her old primary school teacher's wife had died recently. She hadn't given it much thought, but she supposed her mother must have been talking about Mr. Brown. He was the only male teacher she'd had, and Ethel didn't think that Miss Pierce, Mrs. Spriggett, or Mrs. Moyles had been having any clandestine lesbian affairs on the sly. They were too old-fashioned. Ethel wondered briefly if Mr. Brown expected her to comment on his wife's passing. But she was spared the need when he continued once more, readjusting his grip on his dog's lead. I've been curious about you too. You were one of my better students even among all the Year 5 kiddos. So I ask about you sometimes. I hope you don't mind. Ethel did mind, as it happened. She didn't like being spoken about behind her back, even if all the talk was all positive. She didn't know how to articulate this, however, without sounding rude. Stuck for words, Ethel looked at her feet and said, "Oh no, it's fine. Your parents are quite proud of you, you know. They can't stop boasting about you." Ethel thought that this was highly unlikely. She might have gotten into a good university and maybe she was doing well academically. But her parents had never placed much stock in highfalutin things like degrees. Neither of her parents had been to university. Jude had joined the workforce as soon as he'd been able. He'd apprenticed as a plumber. And Lauren hadn't even finished secondary school. She had packed in school altogether when she'd been 15, so she could pursue her dreams of superstardom. Unfortunately for Lauren, however, these dreams hadn't come into fruition. She had done some modelling for trashy tabloids for a few years before debuting as an actress in a few sleazy low-budget flicks Ethel had never wanted to see. Lauren had wound up settling down and starting a family with Jude when she was only 21. Her age, Ethel thought with a shiver. Though she'd never seemed particularly bitter about her lot in life. Lauren had never taken much of an interest in her daughter's creative or academic pursuits, though she had not been dismissive of them either. Lauren had driven Ethel all the way to Wrexham once a week for her violin lessons with Miss Manderley. Lessons she had paid for without complaining. She had seemed pleased too when Ethel had been accepted into her university of choice. Though her pleasure hadn't been much more effusive than a benign, "Oh, that's nice, dear. I suppose we'll have to get your student grant sorted out then, eh?" Ethel found it hard to believe that her mother had been boasting about her academically talented daughter. Lauren would have been more inclined to boast if Ethel had started to dress more fashionably, or if she had learned how to apply eyeliner without making her eyes water, or if she'd started her own successful TikTok channel. Lauren had a TikTok channel of her own, where she filmed herself putting on makeup, taking off makeup, showing off her nails, and singing along to her favourite pop songs. Lauren was actually fairly successful on the platform, and she had managed to rack up over 300,000 followers in the span of 2 years. She sometimes did sponsorships with makeup brands, and it was her newfound fame which had paid for Manny's fancy gaming PC, Jude's new guitar, and the family's holiday in Australia. If Ethel had been like Lauren, bouncy and cheerful, Ethel imagined her mother might have been more inclined to boast about her. But as it was, Ethel thought it was doubtful. It wasn't hard to imagine that Mr. Brown cared about Ethel's academic achievements more than her own parents did. Still, it was kind of him, Ethel supposed, to bother spinning her a white lie like that. He must have been trying to cheer her up. Oh, I'm sorry, where are my manners? You'll be on your Christmas holidays now, won't you? I doubt you'll want to talk about university much right now. Oh, not really. I thought as much. I'm sorry for bringing it up. I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable. The thought was appreciated, but Ethel thought it was rather too late for that. She already felt uncomfortable. That wasn't necessarily Mr. Brown's fault, however. She felt uncomfortable about most things in life. That was just how she was. I'll leave you on your merry way, but I am curious. What are you doing going for a walk at this hour? It's very dark outside, and I think it might start raining soon. Are you sure you'll be all right? Thank you, but I'll be fine. Are you sure? Ethel nodded. I have my phone with me, and I even brought my dad's old torch if it gets too dark. It should be able to light the way, but I won't be gone long. I just want to go looking for bats. Bats? Yes, in nightjars. My dad took me out to look for them sometimes when I was little. I know my way around the forest, so it should be fine. If you say so. Mr. Brown didn't look wholly reassured, but he didn't try to question Ethel further. Maybe he didn't have the time for it. His dog was beginning to tug on his lead, yipping fiercely as he did. Mr. Brown's dog might have been small, but he had quite the set of lungs on him, and he clearly wasn't afraid of using them. Ah, it looks like his lordship's hare's getting hungry. I can't keep him waiting, not if I don't want him to wake up half the blasted village. I should be off now, but do take care of yourself. I know you're a great grown lass by now, but the woods can be perilous at night, even if you have a torch and you know your way. The woods are a lot bigger than they look. I wouldn't want you getting lost, and you do know what happened to the Delaney girl, don't you? Well, of course Ethel knew what happened to the Delaney girl. Everyone in Oxbury did. It had been quite the topic of conversation when it had happened. Ethel hadn't been living in Oxbury then. She'd just started university in Durham, and she'd been trying desperately to keep her head above the water. But Lauren had told her all about it. Her mother had called her breathless to tell her that a girl had gone missing. And it wouldn't be the first time either. Don't you remember that Chloe girl? You were still in primary school at the time, but that caused such a stir too. I wonder if the cases are related. Ethel hadn't liked the way her mother had talked about the girl's disappearance, as though it was some amusing piece of gossip. No different from who was dating who on Love Island. She had found it rather tasteless. Ethel hadn't known the missing girl. She had not been a local of Roxbury. According to the local paper, she'd been staying there for a few days with a couple of relatives, and she didn't remember her first name. She thought it had been something unusual though, something exotic. India maybe? Indigo? Well, in any case, the girl had last been sighted near the edge of the woods by a dog walker. The police had combed every inch of the forest, but her body had never been discovered, if there was a body to uncover at all. It was possible she had grown bored of being stuck in Oxbury and she had run away. There was no guarantee she had come to a sticky end, and neither was there any evidence, but Ethel still wondered. And so it seems did Mr. Brown. It had been almost 3 years since the young Miss Delaney's disappearance, but it had cast something of a pall over Oxbury. As a teacher, Mr. Brown must have been more concerned than most. He had spent the best part of his life looking after small children, cleaning skinned knees and breaking up arguments over who stole whose favourite toy. Ethel could hardly fault Mr. Brown for worrying, but his concern still rankled. There was something uncomfortably cloying about it. Did Mr. Brown still regard her as a child? Was that why he was lecturing her? Ethel was 21 now, but she knew Mr. Brown would never regard her as an adult in her own right. How could he, when he'd known her as a 9-year-old? The realization was an uncomfortable one. It made Ethel cringe. I'll be fine, really. I know my way around and I have my phone. If I do get lost, I can call for help. Who Ethel would call if she got lost exactly was a mystery even to her. She could hardly call her parents, given they were in Australia. And she knew she wouldn't have the courage to call the police. Ethel would have hesitated to call dial 999, even if her home had been broken into by a couple of machete-wielding muggers. She wouldn't have wanted to be a burden. Maybe Mr. Brown realised this. He had known Ethel for several years, but he chose rather tactfully not to comment upon it. Instead, he nodded and said, "Very good. Take care then. And make sure you come back before it rains, eh?" "Thank you. See you later?" "I'm sure you will. If you need anything while your parents are away, remember, Sparky and I are just a few doors down. Sparky? Was that the name of Mr. Brown's dog? Ethel supposed it must have been, though what a small dog like Sparky could possibly do to help her, or anybody for that matter, was a mystery. Ethel doubted she would have cause to call on Mr. Brown, or on Sparky, during the ensuing days. But she didn't say this. Instead she nodded and thanked Mr. Brown, who smiled in return. Good night then, Ethel. I hope you have luck finding your bats. I hope so too. Ethel hadn't had much luck during the last few months. Not since the start of her third and final year at university. She could have used a bit of good fortune. Mr. Brown gave Ethel a brief wave with the hand which wasn't occupied with Sparky's leash and turned. Mr. Brown's footsteps faded away, as did the sounds of Sparky's indignant yapping, though this took far longer to fade. For such a small dog, Sparky was awfully loud. Ethel watched for a few moments, motionless. Then she spun on her heels. It was time to go to the forest. Ethel began to walk through the village once more, picking her way through the latticework of shadows which was slowly lengthening on the ground. Her footfalls were dull on the pavement, a series of muted sounds which offered little competition when contrasted with the mournful moaning of the wind. It had been breezy when Ethel first stepped outdoors, but the wind was beginning to pick up now. It tugged at her braided hair, and she shivered. She should have expected the poor weather, given it was very early January, but she was still surprised by just how frigid it was. What was the temperature? It must have been in the single digits. Ethel looked up at the sky which hung above her, dark and mysterious. The clouds were grim, foreboding even, but they didn't look numerous enough to promise rain. Maybe Mr. Brown had been wrong about the weather. But Mr. Brown was a sensible man, and it seemed unlikely he would make a mistake even, or perhaps especially, about something as mundane as the weather. She would have to be quick about her walk, if she didn't want to get drenched. She would step into the woods and make a neat circuit about the trees. Then, after 15 minutes, she would head back. Yes, that would be fine. She wouldn't wander too far. What was the point? It wasn't like Oxbury's forest was all that exciting either. It was in a dreamlike manner that Ethel navigated the streets. As she did, the wind blew. It sounded sad, like a wounded animal. Maybe coming out here was a mistake after all. What was the point in coming all the way out up here anyway? There was nothing that Ethel really wanted to do in the woods. She was just trying to run away from the responsibilities, like she had after Clementine. But Ethel didn't want to think about that. It was with uncertain eyes that Ethel glanced about the dense woodland which surrounded her. In the distance, somewhere far above her head, an owl hooted. The sound split the air quite suddenly, and Ethel jumped. She hadn't expected it. She could feel her pulse hammering uncomfortably in the base of her neck. Ethel had been into the forest many times before, sometimes with her parents and sometimes with her brothers, though more often than not on her own. But it felt different tonight. Maybe it was because of Mr. Brown's warning. That Delaney girl was on Ethel's mind. It felt almost as if she were watching her from the shadows, giggling at Ethel's unease. There was something disconcerting about the woods tonight, something devouring. It seemed almost to be inviting her in. But beneath its cordiality, there lurked something uncompromising. When Ethel closed her eyes, she thought she could even hear strange whispers upon the breeze. But surely that was silly. Nothing lived in the forest apart from rabbits, mice, and the odd badger. There was nothing waiting in the woods for her. She was being stupid. Ethel took a deep breath. Then she stepped forwards. The loose leaves strewn on the cold, hard ground crunched beneath her soles. And once again, an owl hooted. This time, however, it didn't startle her. She was prepared for it. Ethel continued to tramp through the woods, her father's chunky torch in hand. It wasn't a very reliable sort of light. It kept gushing in and out, but at least it had a dual purpose. If push came to shove and she was set upon by some miscreant, it was heavy enough that she could use it as a weapon. Ethel doubted anybody would attack her, however, despite Mr. Brown's warnings. She was in Oxbury, for goodness sake. It wasn't the sort of place people were attacked, hell. Not even the missing Delaney girl had been attacked. She had simply disappeared. Besides, it wasn't like Ethel had anything on her that was worth stealing. Her phone was an old Samsung, at least 6 generations out of date, so delightfully archaic, in the current year that Clementine had laughed at her. She'd always joked that Ethel's phone belonged in a museum. Ethel hadn't bothered to bring her wallet with her either. There weren't any shops open this late. There were scarcely any shops in Oxbury at all, save for the corner shop owned by the Lilly family, and that closed at 6 o'clock. 6 had already come, then passed a long time ago. Now it was almost 9 o'clock, and Ethel could feel it. The wind blew uncomfortably cold, trailing its invisible fingers against Ethel's cheeks. Mr. Brown had warned her that it might rain, but it felt so cold, snow was beginning to seem more likely. Though it had been cold for the last month, it hadn't snowed yet. It had been a predictably British sort of a Christmas. Not white, but brown and grey and squatty. There had been no pure white sheets of incorruptible snow, nor even a few token powdery flakes falling from the sky. There had, however, been rain, and plenty of it. Rain which had tipped it down in stair rods on Christmas Eve and Boxing Day. It hadn't rained on Christmas itself, which had something of a small mercy. But it had been continuously cloudy and overcast throughout the holy day. Ethel hadn't gone outside on Christmas though, her parents and brothers had. They'd asked if she'd like to take a turn in the woods herself, to get some colour back into her cheeks. But Ethel had declined these generous invitations. Ethel had thought it would be too muddy, and she hadn't wanted to twist her ankle. Fortunately, it hadn't rained at all in the ensuing week. The forest floor might once have been squelching mud and mire, but now the dirt was reassuringly cold and compact. Ethel was unsure whether that would last for very long, however. Not if it really did begin to rain. The moon overhead was round and full that night, just like a perfect pearl, an earring nestled in the ear of a beautiful woman. Lauren had nagged Ethel to get her own ears pierced, but Ethel had never wanted to go along with it. She'd worried that it would hurt, and anyway, she hadn't really seen the point in it. She didn't understand the appeal of poking holes in herself, not so she could gussy herself with studs and hoops and glinting bits of gold. She had no interest in making herself a target for any thieving magpies. Lauren had always laughed at Ethel's unease. "Don't be so dopey. Heaps of girls even younger than you get their ears pierced. I was only 7 when I had mine done. It didn't hurt at all." But Ethel had remained firm. Here's the thing. Sometimes for some people it doesn't hurt. When I had my ears pierced, it hurt so much, but I've always been very sensitive to pain. So that wasn't surprising. I got my ears pierced at the pharmacy, as you do. You love your piercings? Hell yeah. I can't wear much jewelry anymore. I have developed my mother's metal allergy. It causes a lot of skin irritation. At the pharmacy? Yeah! You can get anything done at the pharmacy. Has any degenerate played the violin yet? Not yet. Yeah. We don't have things like Claire's over here. Like the drugstore? Yeah. Yeah, you know, like where you pick up your prescriptions from the doctor and like get cough medicine and like things like that, you know? We get it done at mall like a kiosk. Oh no, we never did that. We never like separated that into like a separate thing. We had them done at our pharmacies. Well, only some pharmacies do them, to be fair. Not all of them do it. The pharmacy I currently go to doesn't do ear piercings. I know that. A lot of piercings have moved into tattoo parlors, but there are some that still get done at pharmacies. Yeah, I feel like that could be safer. It is a lot cleaner than doing it somewhere else. Like they have like replaceable caps that they use and things, and they tell you these are the only earrings you can wear for a while because they're the only like ones you want, and the only earrings you can buy when you want to change, the only ones you can buy at the pharmacy when you want to change to something else, are all sterling silver because they're the cleanest. So that's good too for trying to avoid early infection. I can't wear earrings anymore though, because I can't wear most jewelry anymore. I have developed my own mother's sort of metal allergy thing. It causes a lot of skin irritation, so it wouldn't be healthy for my ears, unfortunately, even though earrings are so cute and fun. But yes, I remember when I had my earrings done back when I was a kid. I was so tiny. I had been so persistent about getting it done because everyone at school had theirs done and I wanted it. And Mum told me, look, okay, we're going to get it done, but we're getting them both done. You can't get scared after the first one and leave. Because she knew me. She knew I was a coward. I'm a little bitch, is the thing. So I was like, no, I won't get scared. It'll be fine. And then I got one done, and it was the most horrible pain a little child had ever felt. That I was like, no, I don't want to do another one. No, I'm sad. I'm scared. And she was like, you literally promised to do both of them. I'm not coming back. Even the surgical steel earrings, yeah, it was the nail gun. It was the piercing gun that did it. It was like really hurt for her. They really, really hurt for me. Just I have a very poor pain tolerance for sharp pain like that, you know? Dull pain I can put up with, but sharp pain I generally can't. She could be stubborn about the strangest of things. Even the surgical steel earrings, yeah, all metal is bad. Yeah, unfortunately. She found some nice natural jewelry that's like made of wood and cord and stuff, and she's got that now, but she mostly just doesn't wear jewelry anymore. I got my cartridge pierced, and my father punched me down before the piercing, lol, right in the mall. What? Why? Why do you do that? I don't get it. Was he mad that you were getting your cartridge pierced? Oh, I didn't feel the piercing because your arm hurt. Oh, that's smart. Okay, that's kind of cool. I think I would still probably like pitch a fit. I've always been better with dull pains like that than sharp stabby stuff. So I don't think that would work on me, Alas. They would have to stab me in the foot, and that would really distract me. I feel like that would work. I think that would work. She could be stubborn about the strangest of things. Lauren had been bemused by her daughter's indifference, but she hadn't pushed the issue, not too much at least. Instead, Lauren had shrugged and said, oh well, suit yourself. You are being daft though, Effie. That was how most of Ethel's conversations with her mother went. She was always calling her daft. Oh, I don't like that. Parents, your words mean things. Sometimes Ethel took offence, even though it was a very mild insult. Better, even, than the kids said on the playground. Things kids said on the playground. Sometimes, however, she thought that her mother had a point. She really was daft. She was being daft right now, wandering through the woods so very late at night. But still, she didn't stop. She kept on walking, the foliage crunching underfoot. Sometimes Ethel liked to imagine that she was a heroine from a romantic poem when she was wandered through the woods. A nameless beauty Lord Byron might have committed to the paper, who walked with all the grace of the night itself. But Ethel knew that this was nothing more than a fantasy. She was in all aspects hopelessly plain. Maybe that was why Clementine had... No. Ethel wasn't going to think about that. She did have to think about her thesis, however. It was weighing on her. Why, she wondered, had she been silly enough to write her thesis on romantic poets when they focused so intensely, obsessively even, on things which were beautiful? If they weren't waxing poetic on beautiful women, then they were writing of the beauties of nature, of lakes and forests and hills and dizzying high cliffs capped with snow. Sometimes Ethel liked to read about the beauties of nature. It was rarer that she liked to read about beautiful women. The former was uplifting, but the latter was just depressing. Was that why she was struggling with her thesis so much? Was it the subject matter? Ethel didn't think that she had lost interest in her poetry, but her enthusiasm had definitely dwindled. Maybe it was inevitable, when Clementine had been the one to pique her interest in the subject. Clementine had always been very passionate about poetry, romantic poetry in particular. Through reading these old poems with Clementine, Ethel had found something in them to appreciate herself. Something she had never noticed before. But maybe it wasn't the words of these poems she had appreciated, but the way they sounded in Clementine's mouth when she spoke them. Had Ethel only pretended to be interested in poetry because she had wanted to have more in common with Clementine? In retrospect, that seemed depressingly likely. Oh, it's okay, baby girl. Many lesbians have fallen into this trap, I fear. It's incredibly common. It is what it is. Like, the amount of women who will just fall into an interest because a cute girl likes it too. Incredibly normal. Don't worry, baby girl. You're only 21 as well. You've got your whole life ahead of you. You don't feel like it because you're 21. Ethel had wanted Clementine to like her. She had almost been slavish in the way she followed her about, laughing at all of her jokes a little too loudly, affirming that yes, of course, all of her essays were wonderfully original. She had even offered to be Clementine's caddy when they had been on campus. Oh girl, you had it bad. Ethel had been only too happy to buy Clementine drinks from the vending machine or snacks from the student shop whenever she so desired. Ethel had wanted Clementine to like her so badly for such a long time. Then, Clementine had liked her, and it had been wonderful. For over a year, Ethel had been suspended upon the clouds. Nothing could have hurt her until it all came crashing down. Had that been inevitable? Maybe she should have expected it. Ethel shuddered. She felt very, very cold and uncomfortable alongside it. The coldness did not abate the further Ethel walked into the woods. An icy chill coiled inside her guts, clenched about her heart like a vice. She could feel it too upon the crown of her head, trickling down her neck. She could feel... Oh! Was that rain? It looked like Mr. Brown had been right. The rain came slowly at first and irregularly, but it didn't take long before spears of the stuff started pelting down. The rain made everything look faint and blurry, as if it was being viewed through a filter. Something in the undergrowth rustled, and Ethel glanced in its direction, the wind whipping her hair about her face. Oh. Did I hop ahead? I think I did. What was that? Ethel knew the answer to that was probably nothing. Or if it wasn't nothing, then it was a small, insignificant sort of something. It must have been a rabbit seeking shelter from the rain. That or a vole. Or maybe a sodden squirrel. There was nothing for Ethel to worry about, apart from the miserable weather, of course. Ethel shouldn't have ventured so far into the woods, but it was too late to worry about that now. She couldn't double back on herself in hopes of avoiding the rain. Her home was a good half-hour walk away. Ethel had come further than she had meant to and had fallen, quite literally, off the beaten path. You never do that, guys! don't walk off the path when you go out into the forest. I mean, you shouldn't go in the forest alone, but don't go off the path, because I have to say, like, 90% of missing person cases are because the person went off the path. Like, just it's survival instincts, girlies. Nah, fuck politeness and stay out of the woods. That's good too. That will also keep you alive. They will also keep you alive. But if you find yourself in the forest, stay sexy and don't get murdered. Murdering isn't the issue with being in the forest, girl. Murdering isn't the issue. People just go missing because, like, they'll fall on a log and they'll like twist their ankle and they can't get up and they're all alone and they'll just die from exposure. And they'll probably get, like, not found because they're off the path. So there's just a corpse there. Like, it happens so often. And a lot of forest ground off the path can be quite irregular. Like, ups and downs and everything. So you can, like, step on what looks like very flat ground. And it could be like a cliff. Because the plants make it look like it's flat. The way they're growing, it makes it look like it's just very flat, but it's actually an incline, and you'll just go tumbling down and people can't find you. Stay out of the woods alone. Okay, so real talk. Here's what you want to take when you go out into the woods. You want water. Bring water. Always bring a massive water bottle. Bring a sturdy backpack, one that won't put pressure on yourself. Like an actual hiking backpack if you can, but one that will actually, you can carry around for hours on end, and it will not cause like discomfort more than just like having weight on yourself, you know. Bring food. Don't bring cheap snacks. Bring like granola bars, things like that, things that are substantial. Cheap food like chips and stuff is not going to keep you going if you go missing. It is actually going to be bad. You want to bring something bright, something very bright, like a bright hoodie, or a really bright blanket or something like that. So if you manage to find a clearing while you're lost in the woods, you can put the bright piece of material on the ground, fasten it with some rocks, and if someone has reported that you've gone in the woods, like they probably have, you probably told someone you were going out in the woods unless you were drunk. But if you went out there with purpose, you should have told someone where you were going, right? So they will know to report you missing in the woods. So most rescue attempts will have a helicopter sent over the woods. If they fly over that clearing and they see something bright on the ground, something that isn't green, mind you, maybe red. Red's a good option, actually. Red is really good. That will draw the attention of the people in the helicopter, and they're more likely to find you. Fire is shit. Don't, like, smoke signals and things. That is such a risky thing if you don't know how to do, like, fire safely. You could take a flare. I'm not familiar with flares, and like how to do them safely. If you can get a radio that isn't on a cell phone, like if you can get a cell phone that isn't, like, specifically hiking cell phones that don't rely on cell phone frequencies but rely on radio frequencies. Does that make sense? You should know what I'm talking about. If you look it up, you'll find something. Those are really good for finding, like, help. You can like call up, like, people for help. Bring a good first aid kit. Bring something that you can disinfect things with. Bring something you can make a splint out of. Yeah. You want something you can make a splint out of. You always want that. You want to be able to disinfect, and you want to be able to cover any wounds. I'm out of practice with, like, hiking and such, for reasons that many people will be aware of. But these are very basic things you can do to raise the chances of you being found. I went on a spiel there, apologies. Back to my cute little reading. All good knowledge. I'm gonna stay out of the woods just in case. Totally fair. The woods are as beautiful as they are dangerous. We'll say that. trees now rose about her, dark and ominous, like mute watchmen standing sentinel. Ethel looked about worriedly. She had no idea when the rain was going to stop, but she doubted it would any time soon. She had to take shelter somewhere, but where? What about the church? St. Catherine's was an old crooked building which bordered the forest. It was located on the fringe of Oxbury, away from the rest of the houses. Ethel's parents weren't religious, but her grandmother was, and she had taken Ethel to St. Catherine's a few times in the past. Mostly for Easter and Christmas services, where they sang hymns praising a god none of them put all that much stock in. Ethel wasn't very religious either. She must have inherited it from her father, just like his freckles. But she did wonder on occasions if the world was governed by some greater power nobody could see. Ethel had even tried praying a few times as it happened to see if some mysterious greater being would answer. But she had felt silly and self-conscious, even though she had been on her own, and she'd soon stopped. She hadn't been able to rid herself of the mental image of her father scoffing as he said, "God? What a load of bollocks! The only God I believe in is Jimi Hendrix." God, he is such a father. Ethel hadn't been about to pray to Jimi Hendrix, however, and the mere idea had been so silly it had dampened her momentary religious musings. Ethel still wasn't sure if she believed in God, but if he did exist, she was sure he wouldn't mind if she took shelter in one of his churches for a while. I think God would be okay with that, Ethel. I think that's a good idea. Especially because you've visited his church before with your grandmother and were a good grandchild being with her for those. I think he'd be very keen on you doing that, actually. I think he'd be okay. If she could avoid the worst of the rain, then she would have nothing negative to say on a subject of organised religion in the foreseeable future. It wasn't like Ethel had any particular vendetta against Christianity anyway, not like her father, who rallied against it as being illogical and impractical. Joe found a lot of things illogical and impractical. Ethel knew that her love for English literature ranked quite highly on his list. I find that this type of person is quite infuriating. If the only things you're interested are things that are logical and practical, that's fine. Your interests are your own, that's totally fine. But if you shame other people for their whimsy, for their fantastical hearts and their soft souls, I find that quite rude, and it's actually incredibly mean. And it makes me so angry. I don't like the dad either. So I don't like the mum. I don't like the dad. Ethel bit her lip. Then she began to pick her way through the forest. The rain was coming down even harder now, thick and fast and unforgiving, and it obscured her vision. It didn't help that it was so dark either. The light from Jude's old torch wasn't doing much to help. It was hard for Ethel to keep her footing. The floor was mulchy and it was festooned with roots, arched, raising things which threatened to trip Ethel at every step. Ethel sidestepped a thorn bush and very nearly walked smack dab into a tree, though she was able to circumnavigate it just in time. That had been a close call. As little as Ethel enjoyed being rained on, she enjoyed the thought of breaking a limb even less. Ethel continued to walk, picking up speed as she did. The church wasn't so far away now. She would be able to duck inside and dry herself off, provided, of course, that the door was unlocked. But she broke through the last line of trees, her clothes sticking to her skin like tarpaulin, and looked up at St. Catherine's. The church was small and squat, but it did look oddly imposing in the dark, its tiled roof superimposed against the wickedly thin crescent moon. St. Catherine's arched wooden door loomed over Ethel as she approached it, almost consuming in the darkness. Ethel had been sure she would be able to take shelter here, like the persecuted Esmeralda in the Hunchback of Notre Dame. But maybe not. It wouldn't have been too surprising if the warden had locked the church come sunset. It wouldn't do to have vandals laying waste to its interior, making off with the burnished bronze table candlesticks and the prayer mats. Ethel didn't think there was anything worth nicking in St. Catherine's, but some people would take anything if it wasn't nailed down. It wasn't like there was much else to do in Oxbury other than look for the potentially decomposing corpse of the presumably dead Delaney girl. But now she had come this far, she felt compelled to try. It would have been foolish to back down now. Ethel paused to wipe her brow free of rainwater. Not that it much mattered, really, given how fiercely the rain was still pouring down. Then she reached for the wooden door of St. Catherine's. She pressed her palm against the door and pushed inward. She didn't expect the door to give way beneath her touch. She was starting to feel decidedly pessimistic. But Ethel gasped, surprised as the door cleaved beneath her touch. So it was open after all. That was reassuring. Ethel paused against the door, pushed against the door with more strength than before, and the door swung inwards. The door was heavy, but it offered little resistance, creaking loudly like some subterranean monster. Ethel could see a sliver of the church through the gap which emerged, and she could see it was dark. This, however, was to be expected. It was very late at night. It seemed unlikely that there would be anybody else there at such an hour. She would have been alarmed, in fact, if there was. It came as a great surprise, therefore, when Ethel found it finally slipped inside the building, and she saw her. Oh? Woman? Woman? Those are pretty shoes. I like those shoes. Oh my. Oh my. There was a girl standing in the chancel, framed by the stained glass window. Ethel couldn't see the girl's face, but she could see how slender her waist was, how shapely her calves. The girl wasn't dressed for a downpour. She wasn't dressed for a British winter in general, the rain notwithstanding. The girl's clothes were simple, a summer dress cinched at the back with a ribbon. Her legs were bare. She wore no leggings, nor any tights. It didn't even look like she was wearing socks. Instead, she wore a pair of sandals which had the slightest suggestion of a heel. The back of the girl's feet were exposed, feet which were arched and raised a couple of centimetres above the floor. The girl was only standing, but there was a curious grace to her even as she remained motionless, which made Ethel's heart ache. Ethel had yet to see her face, but she didn't need to. She already knew that this girl would be heartbreakingly beautiful. The girl wasn't even a little bit damp, not like Ethel. She must have arrived at the church before the rain had started. That, or she'd had the foresight to bring an umbrella with her. Why, Ethel wondered? Hadn't she brought an umbrella too? She could have ducked back inside after Mr. Brown had warned her about the rain to retrieve one. Wouldn't that have been the sensible thing to do? Ethel hadn't wanted to do the sensible thing, however. She hadn't wanted to listen to Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown had been her teacher once, and she had wanted to prove to herself she wasn't a child anymore, that she no longer had to take his advice. How very wrong she was. Once more, her mother's cheerful castigations returned to Ethel. Oh, well, suit yourself. You are being daft, though, Effie. Why was it that all of the adults in her life seemed to know better than she did? Lauren had never been to university, and neither had Jude, but they were far more sensible. Maybe it was because, no matter what Ethel liked to tell herself, she wasn't a real adult herself. She was still a child, a little girl playing pretend. But there was little sense standing there sadly, smelling of petrichor, slowly dribbling rainwater all over the uneven stone floor. The girl was not simply standing there. She was singing. Ethel recognized the song which tumbled from her lips, pure and clear as spring water. It was Ave Maria. Ethel stood there stunned into silence. The more the girl sang, the less of the rest of the world seemed to matter. The steady pitter-patter of the rain fell away. It simply ceased to exist. For several moments it was just Ethel and the girl's lovely lyrical voice. Ethel stood there dumbly, letting the girl's voice wash over her when... My, what do we have here? Oh! Ethel jumped as the girl turned about, her bobbed hair fluttering. The girl was standing in such a way that the stained glass window at the back of the church framed her face perfectly. The positioning of her was so perfect, in fact, it looked like a shot from a movie. The girl, a trained actress, told precisely where to stand. The moonlight, which shone through the window, backlit the girl's short hair so it glowed, just like a dark inverted halo. The girl didn't look like any of the angels Ethel had seen pictured before, however. Not the romantic sort with golden locks and baby blues, nor the biblically accurate ones made of flickering flames with hundreds of vast staring eyes. The girl only had 2 eyes, which were positioned where they should have been and framed with a sweep of dark lashes. Her nose was snub and her lips curved upwards into a small smile. Her skin, meanwhile, was very white. She didn't have wings, and neither did she wear a robe, though her pale green dress looked almost angelic. There was too much mischief in her smile for her countenance to be truly seraphic, but she still took Ethel's breath away. "Hello, stranger. I've not seen you around before. Not that that's saying much, I guess. I don't know many people around here. Were you watching me?" Ethel's face, which had always had a pinkish undertone, now turned red. She dropped her gaze to her feet and mumbled, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "So you were watching me?" Ethel gnawed on the damp, fleshy inside of her cheek. A few moments of silence passed. Silence which was filled with the steady pitter-patter of the rain outside, which fell on the grass and the dirt and all of the tombstones. Ethel could feel her palms beginning to sweat. Slowly, like a mechanical doll in need of recalibrating. She nodded. "Heh, I thought so. I'm glad you're not a liar. I like honest girls." Girl?" Ethel frowned. Manny had taken great offence about being called a boy the moment he'd started secondary school. He was in year 9 now, but his voice had dropped, and he already had facial hair, and everybody called him a young man. Why then did Ethel have to be a girl when she was already 21? She was too old for it, wasn't she? "Oh? Don't you like being called a girl? I didn't offend you, did I?" Oh no, it's fine. I don't mind. I probably offended you more with my staring. I should have said something. I'm sorry." "Aw, you don't need to apologize, silly. I don't mind." "You don't?" The girl shook her head. "I was only teasing. It might be rude to eavesdrop, but I prefer singing when I have a captive audience. Otherwise it feels a bit pointless. So what did you think?" "About what?" "About my singing, obviously. Was it good? Great? The best thing you've ever heard?" "You were enchanting." "Enchanting, eh? That's a bit more flowery than I was expecting. Do you like reading by any chance?" "I study English literature at university, so I guess." "I knew it. You did give me that impression. So," the girl took a seat upon the pew, then shot Ethel a look which could only be described as "come hither." With a thin, half-moon smile, she patted the pew, her pale hand cleaving through the darkness. "Why don't you come here and talk to me? It feels like it's been an age since I last had a chat with a girl my age, and I'm dying for it. Uxbridge's so boring." Ethel hung back abashed, almost afraid at the girl's insistences. Why was this girl so interested in her? She wasn't anything special. It seemed ludicrous, unthinkable even, that she should care. The girl really must have been bored. Was Ethel her last resort? A last-ditch attempt to keep herself amused? Hello?" The girl cocked her head to one side, her smile an amused, impish one. "Didn't you hear me? I would have thought the rain would have washed those ears of yours out. Won't you come and sit with me? I can hardly have a conversation with you from all the way across the church. Unless you're afraid that I might bite." Ethel allowed herself to think briefly of the girl's bite, of sharp incisors digging into her throat like something from a Gothic novel, and she shivered. She wasn't sure if she wholly disliked that thought, and this left her feeling unsettled. Oh, no, it's fine. I'm not afraid. I'll sit. Ethel crossed the church, her soles slapping against the flagstones. Thud, thud, thud. Then sat. She was still damp, and droplets of water slid from her clothes as she walked. Small puddles tracked her progress from the entrance of the church, with its domed door, all the way to the pew where she settled herself. Ethel's long skirt was clinging to her thighs, and her sweater was uncomfortably damp. Ethel tended to wear baggy, oversized clothes, but the rainwater had rendered them uncomfortably skin-tight. She would have felt self-conscious regardless, being seen in such a state by anybody, even Mr. Brown. But being perceived by a girl as pretty as whatever her name was. She looked like she could have been a Celeste or even a Celine. Wasn't doing her self-esteem any favours. Wetly, Ethel looked down at her lap, and wanly, she threaded her fingers together. So, she had sat just as the girl had asked her. Now what? My, you're quite the awkward one, aren't you? You've barely said more than a word to me since seeing me. Please don't tell me you're really afraid of me. What? No. I'm just shy. I'm sorry. You've not done anything wrong. This is all my fault. The girl frowned, one hand resting beneath her chin. You say it's your fault, but I don't think you've done anything wrong either. You don't? No, I don't. I don't see why you feel the need to apologize. I'm not upset. I was just stating a fact. You're so quiet. I was worrying whether I'd done something to upset you. But I guess this is just the way you are. I've never been very good at small talk. I never really know what to say, so, I'm sorry. I must be so boring. Now, I'll be the judge of that. I've not known you long enough to find you boring, and I wouldn't have started talking to you in the first place if you hadn't piqued my interest. You don't think I'm a poor judge of character, do you? In this case, maybe she was. But Ethel was so afraid of offending the girl, even inadvertently, that she hastily said, I don't think so, but it's hard to say. I mean, I don't know you very well. You raise a good point. We are strangers, and this has been a pretty strange meeting. I wouldn't be surprised if you're wondering who this crazy girl is, who's been singing by herself in the church at night. I must seem like a total nutter. I don't know if I'd say that. You probably wouldn't know. I think you're too considerate. I wouldn't be surprised if that's what you're thinking, though. Well, go on. You can be honest with me. You must think I'm balmy. I don't know if I'd call you that. But this is a bit strange, I suppose. Oh, come on. You're being too generous. I know I'm more than a bit strange. Your hobbies might be a bit unusual, I guess. Again with the tact. You'd make a great politician. But who am I to judge? I went for a walk in the woods late at night when I knew it was going to rain. I'm not much better. I guess not. Maybe that's what brought us together then. What, the rain? No, silly. I think there's a deeper meaning behind our meeting than this. Deeper? Yeah, we must be like two alike souls. Or maybe two birds of a feather, if that doesn't sound too out there. We're both weirdos, so we ought to stick together. The world isn't very accepting of people like us. Now, what's your name? Surely you must have one. Oh, I'm Ethel. Ethel's voice was quiet when she replied, as if she was repeating a curse word. And to her ears, it might well have been one. As far as names went, Ethel wasn't very flattering. It was so old-fashioned it spoke more of elderly spinsters than it did 21-year-olds. Shania had teased Ethel about her name incessantly, as though she hadn't been named after the country singer. Ethel would have preferred to be a Shania any day of the week over a boring old Ethel, though. Ethel often resented her parents for landing her with that name, though it was mostly Lauren's fault, she supposed, for naming her after her grandmother, Ethel's great-grandmother, especially when her brothers had suitably modern names. Why was she the only one stuck with a name plucked straight from the dusty archives of a Victorian poorhouse? It was so unfair. The girl didn't seem to mind Ethel's name, however, because she laughed. Ethel, how pretty! No, it isn't. You're teasing me. No, I'm not. Honest to God. We're in a church, and I'd never dare to take the Lord's name in vain. I'm a good Christian like that, you know. Ah, hi, Shale. Thank you for the head pats and the stretchies. Oh. Good stretch. Good stretch. Hi, hi. I hope you're doing well. You are? No. Now I really am pulling your leg. Right. Well, I suspected as much. You shouldn't be so self-conscious, though. Ethel's a perfectly nice name. I've met girls who were saddled with much, much worse. Right. Well, try telling that to Shania. Who's Shania? Oh, nobody. She doesn't matter. Not anymore. You wouldn't know her. Ethel's voice trailed off. Then she frowned. By the way, where are you from? You aren't a local, are you? Oh no, and thank the God I don't believe in for it. The village is so small I think I'd go mad. Madder than I am, I mean, if I had to live here. Are you visiting then? That's right. I'm here to stay with my grandparents over the holidays. My parents are pretty busy right now, so they dumped me here. I've only been here a couple of days, but I'm already bored out of my tree. I couldn't sleep, so I went for a walk. Figured I might as well stretch my legs. I was afraid I'd go stir crazy otherwise, but maybe it's too late for that. Hee. I see. Will you be staying in Oxbury for long? Not too long. My parents will be picking me up in a few days. Oh, right. Of course. Ethel tried to keep the disappointment from her voice when she spoke. Ah, thank you for the headpats, Omni. Oh, and the hydrate. I'll give him a treat. I will do so after stream. Why should she care when the girl went home? She hardly knew her. She still didn't know her name, in fact. Maybe, Ethel thought worriedly. She should have asked the girl that first, before inquiring if she was a local to the area. That would have been the polite thing to do. But Ethel spoke to others so rarely she found it difficult to know what the polite thing to do was. She was so awkward. Well, there was time enough to write this oversight. You're addicted to FF14 and taking photos? Hee. We got another one. I'm glad you're having fun with it. I'm sorry, but it just occurred to me I might not have been born here, but I am pretty familiar with this village. I know my way around rather well, which is how I wound up here. Not that that's saying very much, since there isn't all that much to know. But you know what I mean. Right, Ethel blinked, her plans to ask for the girl's name suddenly scuppered. There was a small pause, then... Do you come to Oxbury very often? More often than I'd like. This place is pretty dead, but oh well. I wound up in Oxbury a lot during the holidays, since my parents are always palming me off on my grandparents. I spent a lot of my summers here, and a lot of my winters too. Ugh. The summers here are depressing enough since there's nothing to do, but the winters are even worse. It's so cold and so dark, and it's so wet too. It rains so much the ground gets all mulchy. It's pretty miserable. No offense. I don't want to insult this place too much, not when you were born here. I hope you don't mind. It's fine, I'm not offended. Actually, I agree with you. Well, good. I'm glad I'm not the only one. It's a different story with my grandparents, though. They love this place. They've been living here for... God, I don't know. Their whole entire lives, more or less. So they're pretty settled. They wouldn't hear a bad word against Oxbury. They're obsessed. They were old, you know, when I was a kid, but they're even older now, if you can credit it. I think that's why they like Oxbury. It doesn't change just like them. It's completely static. Ethel frowned, lost in contemplation. The girl's voice was light, but there was something sad about her words. Something which twisted Ethel's insides. When people reach their twilight years, typically when they pass into their 80s, It became almost impossible to discern their age from their appearance. There wasn't that much difference, or so Ethel had always thought, between an 80 and a 90-year-old. Old age had an anonymizing factor. It stripped the individuality out of people, rendering them indistinguishable from one another. As far as Ethel was concerned, old people were all white-haired and rheumy-eyed, their faces scored with wrinkles. Their fingers were choppy, their hands shook, and they complained of myriad problems: bad backs, bad eyes, bad hearts. Ethel didn't like the body she inhabited at the present. She'd been teased over her appearance one too many times, but she liked the thought of getting older even less. She didn't think she ever wanted to be 50, much less 80 or 90. She liked life too little to try and cling to it for all that long. What was the point? My parents have been having my grandparents look after me since I was a kid, but I don't think they've ever been cut out for the job. They could never keep up with me. Thank you for the pasta check, Hydra. I was a wee little thing back then, about this tall. The girl gestured with her right hand for emphasis. But even then I got this feeling I was no good for my poor old grandparents. I used to fret having to run around after me. Would drive them into their early graves. But it's been years since then. They're both alive and kicking. Not literally. They're so old I don't think they'd be capable of it. Are you afraid they might dislocate their hips if they did that? Ha! I've got to say, I didn't expect that from you. You're more fiery than you look. Oh, I hope you don't mind. Nah, I think it's funny. I like the contrast of your sweet exterior and your spicy interior, hee. It was a surprise, but it was a pleasant one. I don't know if I'm particularly spicy. But thank you? You're welcome. I hope you're not getting the wrong idea, though. I know I'm being mean about my grandparents, but I do love them. They're the only grandparents I have, and I owe them a lot. They're dear to me. But I've had to spend a lot of time with them in this pokey little village, and it does get stifling. Someday I'd like to take off, see a bit more of the world. It's all very constricting. What about your parents? Where do they live? Oh, some tiny town not too far away from here. And have they never taken you on holiday with them before? They've never bothered. Whenever they go anywhere, I've always been dropped here with my old folks. And let me tell you, they really are old. I'm not even sure if they're pushing 90. Or maybe even 100. 100? Ethel stared all the while trying to solve some basic mental maths. Ethel's grandparents on her mother's side were relatively young as far as grandparents were, as they had her mother, when they were in their very early 20s. Her maternal grandmother was only 62. Her maternal grandfather 66. Her paternal grandparents were a bit older. They were both in their mid-70s, but they weren't pushing into their 80s just yet. And they definitely weren't close to 100. The girl's family must have skewed awfully old. Ethel was still trying to work this out. Something the girl seemed to notice because she smiled. I'm exaggerating, of course. Oh, right. Of course. I'm not joking when I say that they're old, though. I don't like being with them in their rank-smelling house, which is all brown and green and damp. The walls have rot and it's moist all the year round, so the window panes are all waterlogged. It's awful. I wouldn't stay here if I had a choice, but I don't really have any friends. And my family's pretty small, so... The girl shrugged. I guess it could be worse. But I don't like having to spend all my holidays out in this dump. I wish my parents would think about me a little more, but that's never going to happen. They've always been so selfish. The girl sighed. She sounded bitter, unexpectedly so given how lightly she'd spoken before. It was obvious that a degree of resentment simmered beneath her seemingly irreverent surface. Resentment which didn't seem to be buried all that deeply. Well, if she had inner demons, she wouldn't be the only one. She was only human. Oh! The girl suddenly gasped wide-eyed as she stared at Ethel. Where are my manners? I've spent all this time talking about myself, but I've not asked about you. You were born in Oxbury, weren't you? Oh, yes, that's right. And you still live here, I'm guessing? With my parents and my 2 brothers, yeah. Rowan and Manny. Ah, I see. I don't have any siblings myself, no sisters or brothers. I've always wondered what it would be like though. It's alright, I guess. You don't sound too sure. Well, it's hard for me to say what it's like. I've had brothers for most of my life. Rowan was born when I was 4 and Manny when I was 7. So I can't really remember what life was like before they arrived. I see. That sounds kind of nice. If I had a sibling or 2 to keep me company, maybe spending all this time with my grandparents wouldn't have been so bad. But who knows? Maybe they just annoy me. I don't know if I like to share my stuff with them either. I can be pretty selfish. The girl's eyes glinted when she said this with a spark of mischief, which made Ethel's skin prickle. There was something a little unsettling about the way she looked at Ethel. Her eyes were intense, as though she meant to devour Ethel from tip to toe. But surely that was nothing more than a fancy. So where is your family right now, Ethel? Are they back at home waiting for you? I hope that they're not worried about you. It is pretty late. I wouldn't want to make them anxious. Oh, no. It's fine. They won't be waiting. I mean, they're not even at home. They've gone to Australia. Australia? That's so far away. I've never been before, but is it true that their seasons are all mixed up compared to ours? They're reversed, yeah. Their winter is like our summer. It's something to do with the hemispheres. Crazy. I'm so used to wet, damp old Oxbury, I think that would take some getting used to, hee. That's what I thought too. I was worried going there would throw me off, especially when it's been so cold here. Is that why you didn't want to go then? Did you turn down their invitation? Or did they not invite you? They did, yeah. My ticket was booked and everything. Mum had been planning it for a few months, ever since April this year actually. She was pretty insistent that I accompany her. It was supposed to be a family holiday, but... Well... Ethel sighed. How, she wondered. Was she supposed to explain her reasoning for staying behind to this girl? She wasn't entirely sure if she understood her reasoning herself. She had overcomplicated things by being so moody. But wasn't that what she always did? She was forever making things more difficult. Not that she wanted to. It just seemed to happen. Hey, Ethel. You didn't have an argument with your family, did you? Oh no, it's not like that. We're fine, really. Everything's fine. Then why didn't you want to go? I'd leave England at the drop of a hat if I could. It's so wet and cold and... Ugh! I can't stand it here, it's so gloomy. Australia sounds much nicer. It does sound nicer, but... But? The girl shifted a little closer to Ethel. So much so their thighs brushed. Don't you like being with your family? Don't you get on with them? It's... Not that I don't get on with my parents. They're nice enough, I think. My mum nags me about my clothes and my hair sometimes, and my dad can be a bit insensitive, maybe. Ethel thought back on the numerous occasions she tried to practice her violin at home. Occasions which had been swiftly terminated by her dad telling her to put a cork in it because he was trying to watch the telly. Oh, hi, Zach. Thank you for the stretchies. Thighs brushing, oh, mama. Yeah. Casual intimacy, oh my goodness. But they're not bad parents. They're not abusive. Other people have it much worse. It'd be unfair of me to complain. And yet, despite that, you still didn't want to go on holiday with them. It's not like that. What is it like then? It's my fault, really. They've not done anything wrong. It's all me. What's all you? I don't understand. It's not that complicated, really. It's just, it's the way I think about things. My parents are fine. They're lovely even, and my brothers... We argue sometimes, but I think that's normal. All siblings argue. Clementine always picked fights with her sisters, too. Clementine? My girlfriend, Ethel was about to say. But that would have been a lie. Clementine wasn't her girlfriend anymore. They'd spoken so little after their breakup, Ethel was uncertain whether she was even her friend. What was Clementine to her now? Was she anything to her now? She's just a person I know from university. We talked a bit. Ah, a friend then. We were friends. I don't know about now, not that it matters. None of it does, really. What doesn't matter? My feelings, maybe? I've been a bit down, I guess. I couldn't tell! But it's all very silly, and it's mostly self-inflicted anyway. I just get like this, in strange moods, I mean. That's what my mum says. She thinks I should buck my ideas up. Maybe she's right. It's not like I want to feel sad. Of course you don't. I don't think anybody does. But sometimes... No, most of the time actually, I feel like a burden. I just bother my parents and my brothers. And Clementine too. That's why I didn't want to go on holiday with them. They insisted, but... I don't know. Chat, I have a story to tell you that's kind of sad. Last year, my family was going to go to the zoo in the city. We had a day planned out and everything. It was like over a month of planning. We have to do that because the city's such a fucking mess. And we had booked one of the scooters, like the disability scooters that you can hire at the zoo, for me. And I was kind of excited to try one out and be able to like exist at the zoo. And I ended up, because I could only have it for an hour, which is just, it's a big zoo, okay? It's a really big zoo. You can't actually see much in an hour. It would feel like I was holding people back from seeing everything, so I said I told them I didn't feel like going and they should just go without me. And I think Mum realised why, but she didn't push it. She never pushes these things because she knows that it would turn into a whole thing, and I understand that, and it's very sweet of her not to push. But it's also like, part of me really did want to go, but I wouldn't have been able to. I would have, oh my god, I'm getting sad. It wouldn't have been like a zoo trip like we used to be able to go on, because we used to go to the zoo a lot. And it would be so different from how we used to go to the zoo that I would feel like I'd ruined it. And so I really relate to what Ethel's saying. Excluding yourself from events and things because you don't want to make it a burden, cause a fuss. You know, I am relating to this a lot. Oh, I'm tearing up. Sorry, chat, hang on. Sorry. Wiping my eyes. Gotta blow my nose now, because I'm a snot generator. Woo! When I cry, I generate so much snot. It's so cute, and adorable. It's really annoying, honestly. Yeah, it's one of the cruel realities of trying to enjoy things with others when you have such a limiting condition, is that if you have done events like that before with people the memories of what you were used to able to do can just be so heavy that you just even for like things I haven't done before, I get scared in a very similar way. Sorry, I got really heavy for a second. I was reading in a visual novel, wasn't I? Yeah. Always cute snot or not? Oh, I would disagree on the snot part, but thank you, babe. I don't mind having it being like a big globby tear person, but it's the globby snot that was really annoying. It's like, oh my god. Really? But yeah. The world is not built for me to enjoy it. Often. Tissues are the fix for both? Yeah. Don't worry, I've cleaned my face up. Yeah. That's why I didn't want to go on holiday with them. They insisted, but I don't know. They said the holiday wouldn't be the same without me, which is probably right, but I think it'd be for the better. I've been so gloomy, I don't think they'd want to put up with me. Oh my god, chat, this is hitting really, really hard. Thank you for listening, guys, and thank you for being supportive. I try and keep things upbeat on stream, but things happen, you know? My parents were planning this holiday for ages. They were looking forward to it. That's why I didn't want to come along. I know I'm not in the right mood to enjoy it. I'd make everyone unhappy and then I'd spoil everything. I think Ethel's fingers lying on her lap curled in on themselves. Her nails, which were short and serrated, she'd been biting them lately, though it was a habit she'd tried for years to kick, digging into her palms. Her shoulders shook. Then very quietly she said, I think they'd be happier without me. Clementine certainly had been. Who's to say that her family wouldn't share her opinion? I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said all that. I was being silly, really. I know my family does care. Obviously they do, it's just sometimes... Shh. Ethel started, surprised. The girl was sitting even closer to her than before. Their fingers twined together and her eyes were round, almost owl-like in their concern. Ethel stammered, stunned by this sudden, unexpected closeness, stunned too by the sensation of the girl's skin upon her own. Her hand was icy cold. It's all right. You don't need to try and explain yourself, not to me. I understand how you feel. I understand only too well. You do? A little. You aren't the only person who's feeling lonely. But I wish you wouldn't be so very hard on yourself. Don't say that nobody cares. I know I shouldn't. It's childish to think that way. Of course my parents care, but they don't make you feel like they do. Ethel looked into the girl's eyes, held captive by the intensity of her gaze. For a few moments she could do nothing except sit there. She swallowed, tasting sawdust in her throat and dead, empty air. Then, like an aged automaton that was in dire need of oiling, she shook her head. Oh, you poor dear. It sounds like life has been very hard for you, but try not to worry. You aren't alone. I know how it feels being unwanted. It's awful, and it feels so unjustified in your case, too. After all. Oh, pretty art! Look at the pretty art, guys! Oh my god! He's so cute. Cute art. Yay! The girl reached out. She cupped Ethel's cheeks with her fingers, her palms icy against Ethel's warm skin, and said, You're so nice. Do you really think so? I think you must be. Otherwise, you wouldn't have listened to me so patiently when I was complaining about my grandparents. You're a sweetheart, and no matter how other people might have made you feel, I'm happy to be spending time with you. Meeting you has been really refreshing, actually. It's almost enough to make me think this was fated. Fated? That's right. I think you were sent here for a reason. You can laugh if you want, but I'm a pretty superstitious person. Maybe it comes from spending so much time with my grandmother. She always put a lot of stock into that sort of thing. Tea leaves and the alignment of the planets and star signs. And I don't think our meeting happened for no reason. It must have been ordained by, I don't know, fate, destiny, karma, kismet, call it what you will. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe I've let one too many of my grandmother's silly stories get to me. The girl leant in even more closely, if such a thing was possible. Then quietly she said, but there must be a greater reason behind why our paths crossed tonight. I'm sure of it. I've been so lonely here these last few days, with nobody my age to talk to. The girl's eyes continued to bore into Ethel's, large dark eyes lined with long dark lashes which seemed pregnant all of a sudden with meaning. But now I have you. You have me? Yes, I have you. You're mine now, just like I'm yours. I can be your strange singing girl who takes refuge in the church at night to recite hymns. And you can be my wet, wind-swept stranger come in from the cold. I'll wait for you tomorrow night too in this church, and we can have another wonderful tryst inside this crooked old building. How does it sound? Don't you think it's romantic? It's just like something from a fairy tale. I fear I would agree. This is the kind of magical encounter I would fall for. I would agree wholeheartedly that I would return the next night and the night after and so on and so forth. It's too perfect. Ethel thought of this, the girl's icy fingers, why were they so cold? Upon her own, and as she did, she felt herself blush. It wasn't a very pretty blush, of course. Ethel wasn't very pretty in general. I have noticed that Ebihime writes a lot of self-deprecating characters. I hope she's okay. I think she's sort of okay these days, but I don't know. Maybe she had a very rough childhood and teenage years. Young adulthood. Maybe it was quite rough on her. I hope she does well these days. She doesn't talk about her personal life very much, and that's honestly fair. We wouldn't want to get weird with her. No one wants their visual novel faves to have the fucking weirdos on their necks. But I hope she's okay. Her blushes when they come were uncomfortably intense. Red and blotchy and not so very dissimilar from acne. She wasn't attractive. Ethel knew she wasn't attractive. But she wondered in that quiet, unstated moment in the church whether she was pretty to the dark-haired girl who cupped her cheeks. I like how predatory the mysterious girl looks. She looks like she's about to snap her jaws, like a fly trap or something. If this is a fairy tale, then would this have a happy ending? Well, now, that depends. On whether you come back, of course. I'll be waiting here, so don't be a stranger. Stop on by. If you don't, I think we'll both regret it. I mean, impishly the girl smiled. Then, I won't be able to do this. The girl dipped her head before Ethel could say anything, before she knew what was happening. Ethel soon felt something soft against her lips, and she gasped. Oh, this is beautiful. I like the colour toning that's going on in this scene, all the green. It's very pretty. I like that sort of like lighting work that's being done here with the colours. She could hardly believe it, but the girl was kissing her. The kiss lasted for about a few seconds. It was a little more than a faint brushing of the lips, but it was enough to make Ethel's heart stammer. She knew as the girl kissed her, her palms still pressed against her cheeks, that this signified a single change. Though what sort of change it was exactly remained a mystery. It was undeniable, however, that this would alter her holiday for the good. Things would never be the same again. The girl had branded her. Her kiss corroded like acid, disintegrating all of Ethel's thoughts as if they were made of nothing more than the flimsiest, most insubstantial crepe paper. There was the church, there was the girl, there was the kiss, and there was nothing else at all, nothing in the whole wide world. The opening intro. She always does an intro. It's so cool. Ethel Briggs has been feeling restless lately. There's something strange in the village of Oxbury. Something which wants to consume Ethel alive. Oh. And as the days start to blur together, Ethel begins to wonder. Would it be so bad to give in? Her love like poison. Look at that damn perv playing the violin in public. So she's in the sanctity of her own bedroom. I think she's okay. I understand though. You have a very passionate feeling about violins. That's such an intense intro. Oh my god. That's so cool. I really like the art choice for this game. It fits fantastically. The rain had let up somewhat when Ethel picked her way back home, but it hadn't abated yet. A fine smattering of raindrops continued to fall from the obsidian sky, drumming disaffectedly against the foliage above and about her as Ethel tramped through the forest. The ground was muddy and uneven, and Ethel had to take great care with every single step she took. One wrong move could easily spell a sprained ankle and muddy knees, bruised and bloodied palms. The rain struck Ethel's scalp. It trickled down the nape of her neck. It stuck her close to her skin and it chilled her to the bone. By the time Ethel finally managed to make her way back home more than half an hour later, she was sniffling. Ethel shed her shoes at the front door and shed her coat not long after. Her shirt, her skirt, and her socks all went the moment she made her way to the bathroom where she ran herself a bath. Oh, that's so pretty. There. She sank into the bathtub, sighing with relief as she submerged herself within the awaiting water. If there was one positive to being caught in the rain, it was that taking a nice warm bath always felt better when chilled right down to the bone marrow. Ethel could feel the bathwater restoring life anew to her icy body. It was refreshing, rejuvenating even, and she sighed in dazed relief from it. Ethel almost believed as she curled herself up inside the tub that she was being reborn. The water was restorative. It would help her shed her old skin butterfly-like so she could emerge from the bath as a brand new girl. A more confident, conventionally pretty girl with smooth skin which had never known a spot, and hair which wasn't quite so prone to tangling. Her old skin, her old shell would lie like a deflated balloon in the bottom of the bathtub, grey and bloated and swollen from the soapy water. Ethel would deride it. Then she would discard it. God, Ethel wished she could step out of her own skin, if only for a few brief, glorious moments. But when she finally pulled the plug and stepped out of the tub, the rest of her body came with her. Every last fold and every square centimetre of skin. Well, so much for that. Ethel toweled her hair dry, pointedly looking away from her reflection as she did, and pulled on her pyjamas. Then She retreated to her bedroom, which wasn't really hers, not anymore. It was Manny's. He had remade this room in his own image, and Ethel didn't much like what she saw. It was a room which was obviously meant for a teenage boy, so much so she felt like an interloper. Manny might not have been there to chase her out of his room, but his disdain lingered. She didn't belong there. Feeling displaced and disoriented, she lay back on Manny's sheets and let her eyelids fall shut. Had the events of that night really happened? Had the girl truly kissed her? It was hard to say. Everything had unfolded with a subtle sense of surreality. Surreality. The girl's voice light and irreverent enough to mirror the beating of a butterfly's wings. Now Ethel had put some time and some distance between herself and the girl. She found it even harder to believe what had happened. What reason would the girl have had to loiter about at St. Catherine's so very late at night? Didn't make any sense. Wait, we never got her name? Yeah! We never built up the confidence to interrupt her. And ask. It's so fucking funny. I bet her name is like a dead giveaway for what she is. And it made even less sense that the girl had kissed her. Ethel had found it hard to come to terms with Clementine's affections when her ex-girlfriend had confessed to her. But she found it harder still to accept this girl's feelings. Clementine's septum had been pierced. She had dyed her hair pink. She had kept a Tumblr blog long after Tumblr had stopped being cool. And in her childhood she had written fanfiction about Sam and Dean Winchester from Supernatural kissing. Oh! She was into Wincest, I see. Sorry, that was the Tumblr name for that ship. Clementine hadn't been perfect. Clementine had been more than willing to admit that she wasn't perfect, and she'd since disavowed the problematic fanfiction she had crafted in her heady, uncomplicated teenage years. Apparently, she'd been too young and stupid to know not to make the two brothers make out for several hundred words. Though she had sounded rather proud when she had told Ethel that one of her immature, incestuous efforts had garnered a whopping 207 kudos on AO3. I mean, that's pretty impressive, honestly. There had been something reassuringly human in Clementine's flaws and her dark roots which showed through her pale pink hair, the gap in her front teeth, and the way she'd snorted when she'd laughed. Clementine had been brash and loud and brassy, and she had intimidated Ethel when she had first met her at their university's writing club. Ethel hadn't ever imagined that a cheerful, outgoing, interesting girl like that would ever care about her. But she had been prepared to believe that Clementine was still an ordinary girl like she was, a girl who was made of flesh and blood, who could laugh and who could cry and who would laugh at herself when talking about her old, embarrassing fan fiction. I used to write Homestuck fan fiction. Anyway, the girl at the church, however, was different. She was so pretty, she seemed almost otherworldly. Was she really human? Ethel couldn't imagine the girl at church crying. She couldn't imagine her blushing, and she definitely couldn't imagine her shipping Sam and Dean Winchester. The girl seemed removed from petty concerns like fandom drama. What interest did she even have anyway? How did she fill her free time beyond kissing complete strangers in churches late at night? Ethel tried to furnish a past for the girl, some sort of backstory, but kept coming up blank. Like the awkward pieces of an old jigsaw puzzle, nothing quite seemed to fit. The girl was an enigma, just like the woman from the famous Byron poem that literature professors still talked of 2 centuries later. She walks in beauty like the night. Who was she, though? Where was she going? What was she thinking? Perhaps she wasn't going anywhere or thinking anything. The woman who walked in beauty never managed to arrive at a destination. How could she when she didn't have one? Beautiful people didn't need to do. They only needed to be. Ethel was unsure, however, if the girl really was. She didn't feel real. None of that night had felt real. Ethel, meanwhile, felt far too real for comfort. Her hair was still wet from her bath. She hadn't dried it thoroughly enough, and it was soaking the sheets. It felt like there was a damp towel pressed against the nape of her neck, and it made her squirm. It wasn't exactly comfortable, but she was too tired to get up and dry her hair again, much too lazy to hunt for her mother's hairdryer. She would simply leave it be. Slowly, as she lay there, sleep began to creep up on her. It clouded her senses, dulling them until her thoughts felt oddly hazy. Ethel could still hear the rain as it fell outdoors, but it was very faint and indistinct, hardly audible. The soft pitter-patter of these scattered raindrops mingled with the sighing of the breeze, Ethel's own exhalations. Once again, Ethel thought of the strange girl and of her strange kiss. It must have been over an hour since the girl had brought their lips together, but Ethel's body was still burning. Her thoughts, meanwhile, continued to run into one another, all of them blurring together into an incoherent, indistinct mess. Ethel saw Clementine in her mind's eye with her sweet smile and her fluffy pink hair, but she was beginning to skew, to twist, to split apart, like a reflection viewed in a film of water's undulating surface. Ethel couldn't pin it down. One of Clementine's eyeballs fell out of its socket. Her mouth began to melt. She was starting to shift. Ethel wasn't picturing Clementine, not anymore. It was the girl from the church instead. Ethel saw her vivid eyes. She saw her pale skin. She saw her legs, so slender, like a ballet dancer's. She thought of how those legs had swished back and forth, like metronomes. The girl smiled at her. Then Ethel's consciousness failed her, and she fell asleep. Ethel's sleep was anything but restive, however. In her dreams, which were faint and half-formed, she was in the forest again, flanked on all sides by walls of dark, damp vegetation. The forest was pulsing about her just like a living creature. It throbbed, and Ethel found her own heart throbbing in tandem with it. "Oh, thank you for the lurk, Endeavour." She was running, her bare soul sinking into the dirt, though she had no idea what she was running from. Didn't know what was pursuing her. What was it that chased her in the dark, lurking amongst the trees? Ethel thought to turn her head, if only to discover the identity of her shadowy assailant. But she couldn't afford to let her attention wander. Tripping and falling would spell disaster. Ethel continued to run, on and on and on, her heart hammering in her chest all the while. Her hair fluttered as she skirted the trees and her long shirt billowed about her. She turned this way and that, searching desperately for an escape. But part of her already knew that it was too late. Her shadowy pursuer was fast approaching. It was much quicker than she was, and she could never hope to outrun it. She could never outpace it. It would find her, and when it did, its lips would curl upwards in the corners, its teeth sharp as knife points glinting in the moonlight. It would sink its fangs into her neck. Then it would tear out her throat. She would scream, of course, as she oozed red-black blood, and then, suddenly Ethel stumbled. Her right leg had snagged in the root of a tree, and she fell. She tumbled forwards, her arms flapping, her eyes wide and afraid. But she didn't hit the ground. Instead, she woke up tangled amongst her sheets like a fish in a net, gasping for air. Her face was uncomfortably flushed, despite it being another cold morning, and her palms were slick with sweat. There was an unpleasant taste in the back of her mouth like mould or decay, and her tongue felt oddly furry. Had she forgotten to brush her teeth last night? Ethel tried to cast her mind back, but she couldn't. Her mind felt like it had been scrubbed clean, her thoughts a vague, hazy blur. The back of her head hurt. Her limbs were aching, as though she really had been dashing through the woods in a desperate bid for her life. The remnants of her dream were fast beginning to fade, exposed to the daytime light which was filtering in through the windows. Ethel sat up, then pressed her palm against her forehead. It felt clammy. Was she getting sick? She hoped she hadn't caught a fever after wandering about in all of that rain. She didn't want to prove Mr. Brown right. Not, she supposed, that it mattered all that much. She doubted that she'd be seeing him again. Ethel blinked, her eyelids heavy, and stared at the wall of the bedroom. The bedroom which had once been hers, but was no longer. "Hi, Voided! How you doing? Hope you're doing well." Most of Ethel's old furniture remained. The bed was still her old one, and so was the wardrobe beside it. But Manny had transformed it in her absence. "Good, how are you?" "I'm okay. Could be better. could be worse, you know. Ethel's old books and her journals and her little collection of ceramic fairies had all been thrown out, replaced with trophies from Manny's various football matches and his favourite sports manga. At least Ethel's old swivel chair, salvaged from a friend of Jude's who'd meant to throw it out, was still there. Ethel's ancient PC, however, had been chucked, replaced with a brand new model with a translucent case which lit up like a display of pyrotechnics. Ethel could see traces of her old life in this room, but they were few and far between. The times had changed and they moved right past her. What are we up to today? We're reading Her Love Like Poison, an Epihime horror Yuri visual novel. She didn't belong here. She was no longer wanted. Had she ever been? Ethel sniffed. The wall blurred and she had to wipe her eyes fiercely with the back of her arm. What is wrong with you? Sharply she scolded herself. Stop thinking too much. You'll never get anything done like that. Ethel pressed the heel of her palm against her eyes so hard her vision blurred. Then she forced herself to stand. She threw aside the covers of her bed and set about her day. Not that there was much of the day left. It was already... Oh my god. I think that's... So... Oh my god, it's military time. That's 1 p.m, right? I'm pretty sure that's 1 p.m. How could she have slept for such a long time? At university, she'd gotten into the habit of waking up early in the morning. At 8, if not sooner, for her lectures. She'd been letting things slide at her parents. Well, yes, 1 p.m. Thank you, Jackie. Maybe because she'd gotten into the holiday spirit. She didn't have any lectures to attend, so there was no real reason for her to get up with the rising of the sun. She didn't have anything to do, nor anywhere to go, full stop. This thought was depressing, though, as was the realization that she had only about 3 hours of sunlight left to her. The days were so short lately, the nights so long. It was cold, too. Ethel shivered as she changed out of her pyjamas and into her casual clothes. The same sweater she'd worn last night and the same shapeless skirt which she had left to dry on the radiator. She didn't care enough about her appearance to rootle about in her suitcase for any other clothes. And everything hung up inside the wardrobe now belonged to Manny. Once she tied back her hair into plaits, she then set about her day. She meant to work on her thesis. She would work on her thesis, but first she had to have breakfast. Or lunch, given how late it was. Ethel made herself a cheese toastie in the kitchen using the toasty press that her father always forgot to clean, so crumbs kept getting stuck in it. Man, a cheese toastie always sounds really good. When is it not a bad time to have a cheese toastie is the real question. Ethel made sure to check the press for mouldy crumbs very, very carefully before she stuck her cheese sandwich between it. Ethel ate her toastie and sipped at a cup of peppermint tea she had made herself. But this wasn't enough to satisfy her appetite. All of a sudden she felt ravenous. She made another toastie, with ham this time, bright pink like sunburnt skin, and she ate that in silence too, with a second cup of peppermint tea. Ethel even thought after that ham and cheese toastie she could go for a third. But it was here that she stopped herself. There wasn't much bread left or much cheese, and she didn't fancy trekking to the corner shop. She wasn't in the mood for human interaction. Ethel washed the toastie press in the sink, if only to stop herself from daydreaming about a third toastie, and set it on the rack to dry alongside the butter knife in her plate. This task accomplished, she brewed a third cup of tea. There were still plenty of tea bags, at least. They took her mug to the living room. She would work on her thesis later. She still had time. First, she wanted to see what was on the TV. There was nothing wrong with that, was there? She needed to relax. Ethel flipped through the channels, but nothing caught her fancy. They were mostly showing old Christmas movies, the Santa Claus and the like. It was appropriate, Ethel supposed, given the season. But she wasn't in the mood to watch any Hollywood actors wearing fat suits ho-ho-hoing. For want of anything else to do, Ethel wound up rifling through the DVD shelf. Manny might have thrown away her old wind chimes and her fairy figures, but her DVDs were still here, the box sets of Buffy and the Vampire Diaries and Doctor Who. After some deliberation, Ethel settled on Supernatural. She'd seen the series through multiple times, but the adventures of the Winchester brothers always cheered her up. The series was old, and it was definitely corny. But that was where all the appeal was. It was fun. And that was something Ethel's life severely lacked. Ethel watched 5 episodes of the first season of Supernatural. Oh my god, look in the back. There's an artist's rendition of the characters. Oh my goodness. Doctor Who fan, hell yes. Yes! And she's got everything. Ethel watched 5 episodes of the first season of Supernatural, then made a start on the 6th. She paused at intervals to make herself fresh cups of tea, or to snaffle snacks from the kitchen. Then, before she knew it, the day disappeared. When Ethel checked her phone, she saw it was almost 21. Oh my god, I hate military time. Military time. $9 p.m? Thank you, my girl. I've pulled up a military time calculator. Because it pisses me off. Robert, it's pissing me off. Why do we need to go to the woods when we have such shows at home? It's a good question. It's a good question. I don't think Ethel is always the cleverest, but I also think Ethel is a very depressed woman. And depressed people don't make good choices. Where had all the time gone? Ethel gnawed worriedly on the end of her plate as she weighed up her options. Wasn't it too late to make a start on her thesis, she supposed? I'm here for you, I live in 24-hour clocks. Oh my goodness, you're built for it. You're built for it, that's crazy. She wasn't tired, despite it being pitch black outside, largely because she'd woken up so late herself. She could still make some progress if she applied herself. She just had to focus. She could... Oh! Ethel's thoughts were soon interrupted, however, by a ringing in the kitchen. It was the rarely used landline. Somebody was calling her, but who and why? Wasn't it a bit too late to receive any calls? Part of Ethel hoped stupidly that it was Clementine, calling at long last to check up on her. She soon dismissed this thought, however, as a fleeting fancy. Clementine hadn't spoken to her in over a fortnight. Ethel couldn't see any reason why she would do so now, not if she hadn't bothered to call during Christmas or on New Year's. There was nothing special about the date. It wasn't anybody's birthday. Besides, if Clementine had wanted to call her, she would have called Ethel's ancient Samsung. Ethel's mobile had been silent all day, however, and the day before that, and the day before that. It wasn't as though Ethel had no friends, even if her social pool had dwindled significantly after she'd broken up with Clementine. None of them had wanted to check up on her, however. It wouldn't be a friend then who was calling. It was far more likely to be her parents. The phone kept ringing, the sound shrill and unpleasant as it echoed inside Ethel's skull. And she winced. All right, I'm coming. Ethel got to her feet and shuffled her enthusiastic way into the kitchen. Then she removed the phone, a bulky, boxy thing from its cradle, and held it to her ear. Hello, this is... Oh, hello there, honey. I'm glad I finally got through to you. It took a minute. I was worried I was having trouble with the connection. I texted you a couple of times, but you didn't reply. I was starting to wonder about you, all alone in the house. Have you been? Are you hanging in there? Everything's okay, isn't it? Nah, we have answering machine for these times. If it's her parents, they will start to fret because she is on her own. Ethel took a step back, unnerved by the sudden deluge of words from the other end of the line. She wasn't sure how to answer this. How had she been hanging in there, metaphorically speaking? She was still alive, at least, but she didn't necessarily feel it. Her sleep schedule had been so shot. She still felt half awake, or maybe that should have been half asleep. There was a pause, and then... I'm... fine, I guess? That's great, Effie. I'm glad things are going well. And what time is it over there? It's 8 here and we've only just woken up. We'll be on our way down to Brekkie soon. That was very like Lauren. She had a way of infantilizing her in speech, breaking down words like one might when talking to a baby, regardless of whom she was interacting with. fair. I'd always hit the machine before I picked up because I like knowing who's on the other end first. That's totally fair. I'm usually a person who will pick the phone up and just be like, "Hi, who is it? What's going on? Hello?" Not because I particularly like talking on the phone, but because it's very stressful hearing the call going on and on and on your end. So I like being a bit considerate like that. Ethel did wonder sometimes when she was feeling especially cynical if this was a habit Lauren had picked up from TikTok in her attempts to make her videos suitably inoffensive and toothless. But Lauren had always been like this, long before becoming a micro-influencer. She had embarrassed Ethel plenty during her school's parent evenings, when Ethel would, without any trace of irony, ask whether her then teenage daughter had been a good girlie who'd not been up to any mischief. "But I'm waiting for Manny. You know what he's like in the mornings. He's awful for it." "Oh yes, I know." Ethel knew this only too well. She'd been on the receiving end of Manny's sour stares more times than she could count over the last couple of years, when she'd come back to her parents from university. Manny had been sweet enough when he'd been a child. Ethel could still remember the way he'd clung to her, begging her to play with him, but he'd undergone a drastic transformation once puberty had hit him. His skin hadn't turned green, and he had not sprouted any antenna, but he had become surly. So much so, Ethel sometimes wondered whether her parents shouldn't have called him Moody instead. Manny had also become something of a night owl. It wasn't uncommon for him to stay up until the early hours gaming. He would commandeer Rowan's old laptop when Ethel was at home, and he could no longer access his fancy PC, but he said it was too old to run his favourite games properly, that it stuttered and lagged. Being parted from his gaming PC always put Manny in a bad mood, and when he had lost a match on Rowan's laptop, his cries of disappointment would filter through the thin walls of the house. It looked like Manny was up to his old tricks even in Australia, but maybe the jet lag could be a contributing factor to his inability to wake up. Well, whatever the case, Ethel didn't begrudge her mother for having to wake him. Although, now that she thought about it, the task of waking Manny up had probably fallen upon Jude's capable shoulders instead. They were a lot bigger than Lauren's. "It's almost 9 here," Ethel said in response to her mother's earlier question. A reply which, though Ethel could not see it, she was sure made her mother blink. "In the morning, dear?" "No, in the evening. It's pitch black outside. Australia is 11 hours ahead of the UK, remember?" "Oh yes, 11 hours. You're always on top of these things, Effie. You're such a snotty pants." "I don't think so." "Oh, but you are. Don't be so hard on yourself. You need to learn how to take compliment. Now, how's that thing that you've been working on?" "Thing?" "Yes, you know, the thing for your uni, what's it called again?" "You're referring to my thesis?" "Yes, that's right, your thesis. How's it going, baby girl?" "Well, I would hope. You did miss out on coming to Australia after all for it." "Oh, everything's all right, I guess." "That's great, honey. I'm glad to hear it. Your mother's rooting for you. You've got this." Lauren might not have understood what Ethel was studying, but at least her support was genuine. Ethel knew that her mother really was rooting for her, regardless of what happened. They were about as different as it was possible for a mother and daughter to be, but Lauren's love for her daughter was sincere. Ethel was quite fortunate, really, to have a pair of parents who did care about her so much, even if they didn't understand her. She appreciated everything her parents had done for her, but that only made her feel worse for fudging the truth. Why couldn't she be more honest? "Well, I'll leave you to it then, my little genius. Study hard, but not too hard. You know what they say, all work and no play makes Effie a dull girl. Go and have fun if you can. Not that there's much to do around Oxbury, I'll admit. Still, you could always get the car, maybe go for a drive to Marsden." "I can't drive, Mum. I didn't pass my test." "Oh yes, my mistake. Still, you're almost there. Even I can drive, and I was hopeless at school. Miss Pike always said I was thicker than a brick wall, and she was probably right. You should be able to manage your driving test easy peasy at clever clogs like you. There's nothing to it. Just don't kill anybody and you'll be golden." "Thanks, I'll try to keep that in mind." "Atta girl. Now I must be off. It looks like Jude's finally managed to get Manny out of bed, and about time too. He was sleeping like the dead. I'll speak to you later, Effie. Have a nice rest of your night. Not that there's much left. Not that there's much of the night left. Ta-ra now." "Tara? Tara? I thought it was ta-ta." "Yes, goodbye." There was a click on the other end of the line. Then there was nothing. Lauren had gone. She had left her sad, serious daughter, who was sequestered away in their too small home in the grey and desolate Oxbury, and returned to the sea and the surf of exotic Australia. Well, the sea and the surf would come later, probably. First, Lauren and the others would be going down to the dining room, where they would eat their fill of fried sausages and fried mushrooms and baked beans. Mum deploys the old it ain't illegal you aren't caught until you're caught thinking. Yes, it sounds about right for this mother. It ain't illegal until you're caught. Classic. Ethel frowned. Her mother ate just as much as she did, if not even more. But she was as skinny as a post. Ethel, meanwhile, couldn't look at a full English fry-up without gaining weight. Life could be so unfair. Speaking of food, Ethel could hear her stomach rumbling. Maybe it was time to root through the fridge again. With some luck, she should be able to find something worth eating. Ethel commenced her search and was soon rewarded with some spoils which looked promising. At the back of the fridge, covered with a taut layer of cling film, was a shallow baking tray full of Mother's cherry pie. Lauren wasn't the best cook. She tended to wing things, and her culinary creations always ended up undercooked, overcooked, or underdone as a result. But she was a surprisingly decent baker. Lauren's grandmother, Ethel's great-grandmother, whose name she had inherited, had taught Lauren ancient arcane art when she was younger, and Lauren had always been very close to her granny. Lauren had taken her granny's recipes to heart. She had practiced and perfected them for birthday parties, village fetes, and charity sales until her brownies and blondies and chocolate chip cookies became the talk of all the mothers at Oxbury Primary. Lauren had stopped baking quite so much once Manny had grown up, but she still liked to dabble from time to time. That was where this cherry pie, sitting on the bottommost shelf of the fridge, had come from. Lauren had been anxious the night before her flight. She was afraid of heights and terrified of planes, and hadn't been able to sleep. Not knowing what else to do with herself, she'd gone downstairs at 2 a.m, wearing her favourite pink nightgown, which made her look a bit like the stuck-up poodle from Oliver and Company, and she'd begun to bake. When Ethel herself had woken later, much later at 1 p.m, her parents and her brothers had already left for Luton Airport. They hadn't awoken her to wish her goodbye, though perhaps they hadn't needed to. They had said goodbye the night before, and in any case, Lauren had left her daughter a note. "We've already left for the airport, love," she'd written, the loopy cursive. Lauren's spelling wasn't the best, but her handwriting was a work of art, picked out in patchy blue biro. "So don't worry about us or wonder where we are. I'm sure we'll be fine. I couldn't sleep last night, so I made some cherry pie. It's cooling in the fridge right now. Have as much as you want. If you don't, it'll go to waste. Love you, Iffy. See you later. Stay safe. Kiss, 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 kiss." That was one of the things Ethel liked about her mother. They might not have seen eye to eye on a lot of things, but Lauren wasn't exactly stingy with her affection. Ethel allowed herself a small smile as she took the cherry pie from the fridge. It had been a few days since her parents had left for Australia, and she'd been grazing on the pie in their absence. It wasn't as good as it had been. The crust had lost some of its crunch, the cherries inside their contradictory, sweet sharpness. But it was more than edible. There was only one slice left, and Ethel meant to make short work of it. She slid the remaining slice of cherry pie on an old IKEA plate, which she then shoved inside the microwave. She let the pie rotate in the microwave for a couple of minutes before drawing it out. The centre of the pie had cratered, and the bright red cherry filling looked almost garish. It was streaked across the plate, bright enough to be obscene. The darker pieces of cherry mixed among the lighter, more inoffensive sauce looked unnervingly like blood clots. Ethel was reminded rather forcefully of the toilet bowl during her period, and her stomach turned. Maybe she wasn't as hungry as she had thought. For a few moments she considered scraping the cherry pie into the bin, but she discounted the idea. She didn't want to throw away her mother's hard work. Ethel took the cherry pie to the kitchen table, then sat down. She began to eat, trying to force all unfortunate associations with the lopsided pie on her plate and the toilet bowl to one side. But this soon proved to be a difficult endeavour, especially when a strange musky taste spread across her tongue. Ethel's nose wrinkled. What was that? It tasted like Jude's compost heap in the garden smelt, of dirt and decay. Ethel had sampled her mother's cherry pie numerous times in the past, even the less than perfect pies which had burned on the bottom, but it had never tasted quite like this. Ethel swallowed her mouthful of pie as best she could. Then she examined it. looked normal at a cursory glance, but a quick excavation of its underside with the times of her fork revealed something rather alarming. The crust, which encased the pie, once a uniform gold, had endured a troubling transformation process. The pie crust was flecked with discoloured patches, ghostly white, and more worryingly, a sickly lichen-like green. Was that mould? Ugh. Ethel's stomach, which had felt uneasy ever since awakening, lurched. She felt like she was going to be sick, but she didn't want to be. Just like some people felt faint at the sight of blood, Ethel couldn't stand the sight of vomit. A fact which hadn't made her very popular at Madeline Dawes' 6th birthday party. Madeline had forced them all to play a game, overseen by her mother, where the participants had to stuff as many marshmallows into their mouths without gagging. One girl, Naomi, had managed a whopping 21 marshmallows before her gag reflex had kicked in. She had thrown up. A horrible pastel pink semi-thick sludge which had oozed, not trickled, down her chin and onto her frock. Naomi's vomit had smelt awfully acidic, but it had been sickeningly, cloyingly sweet at the same token, her vomit semi-solid and full of pillowy pastel chunks of marshmallow. It had been the smell of it more than the sight of it which had turned Ethel's stomach. Her innards had twisted like kneaded dough. Then, in sympathy for Naomi, she also vomited. This had triggered a chain reaction. By the end of Madeline's party, 4 children had emptied the contents of their stomachs all over Mrs. Dawes' newly installed Siberian white carpet. Oh dear! The writer is so descriptive, 10 out of 10. That's what I love about Eva Hime so much. She always has such incredible prose. She says so wonderfully things. She describes things in such an interesting way. Because while she is incredibly descriptive, she is descriptive in a way I have never encountered before, if you have to understand. Like, it's so charming and so interesting. Ethel hadn't been invited to Madeline's house again, though Naomi had. Ethel had always found that unfair. Naomi had been the one who had thrown up first, but maybe it didn't matter who'd done it first. Thank you for the hideaway. It mattered that Ethel had, because she had only ever been there under duress. A pity invitation sent by Madeline's mother. Because she knew Ethel didn't have any real friends at Oxbury Primary. Madeline's mother had soon stopped pitying her after that great vomiting incident, however. This memory brought a fresh flush of shame to Ethel's face. She swallowed the bile which was rising in her throat, thick and fast, and pushed the mouldy cherry pie to one side. Then she leant back in her chair, pressing her hands to her cheeks, trying to force herself to breathe. What was she supposed to do with the rest of her time? She supposed she could always play the violin. But the thought didn't fill her with much excitement. She couldn't see the point in playing if it did not make her happy, but that was where the problem lay. Nothing had been making Ethel happy as of late. When she thought about what she wanted to do, all she could see was a void, blank and empty. Ethel continued to sit there, the nape of her neck pressed up uncomfortably against the back of the chair, her cheeks sticky from cherry pie. She was sure, though, she couldn't see herself, that she must have looked in like an awful mess. But the girl yesterday in the church had been nice to her. Nicer than she probably deserved. She called her pretty. Then she'd kissed her. The thought of this kiss surfaced to the forefront of Ethel's mind. Then she flushed. Maybe she would go and see the girl. It wasn't as though she had anything else to do. Ethel rose from the dining room table, then padded over to the front door. Once there, she put on her shoes, which were old and worn, like all of her clothes. They were insides worn away from rubbing against Ethel's soles. They felt a little too snug around her feet. Perhaps she ought to buy a new pair, but Ethel endured it. The physical discomfort was a worthwhile trade-off for the reassuringly familiar fit of them. Dressed and ready to weather the great outdoors, Ethel retrieved her father's torch from his toolbox once more, where it slumbered in the dark alongside his other tools. His screwdrivers, Allen keys, and other bits and pieces Ethel couldn't name. Now armed, And feeling a little like a discount knight from an old fairy tale, Ethel then left the house. Ethel closed the door behind her with a thud and fumbled with the keys for a few moments. She tried to jam them rather futilely into the lock, before she realized she was trying to use the back door key instead. Ethel's face flushed at this folly, though there was nobody around to tease her for it. She didn't come back home very often, and she got simple things like this mixed up sometimes. After locking the door, she then set off into the night, the rickety gate fencing the family's house creaking beneath her fingertips as she pushed it open. She hoped that she'd be able to make it into the woods uninterrupted, but... "It's the doggy!" The distinctive, high-pitched sound of a dog's barking made her pause. That barking sounded awfully familiar. Was that... Yes, it was. Ethel could see a small, fluffy dog rounding the corner. One of such a diminutive stature and with such floppy ears it looked a little like a toy brought to life. There was a red collar around its neck, bright and glossy-like, the glazed exterior of a red candy apple, and a leash attached to the collar. The leash extended upwards into the gloom and was wound about the fingers of a man, whose height eclipsed the dog's to a comic degree. The dog could only have been Sparky, while its owner was Mr. Brown. Ethel hung back, feeling shy and stupid, half hoping that Mr. Brown hadn't seen her. She didn't want to get involved in any conversations. Part of her hoped that by sliding into the shadows he might walk past her, but to her disappointment... Well, well, now this is a coincidence. I didn't expect I'd be seeing you twice, not 2 days running. Ethel wasn't slender or insubstantial enough to slink into the shadows, not as she fancied the girl from the church could. All she could do was stand there feeling foolish, as Mr. Brown approached her. He blinked, then said, "Ethel, are you all right?" Ethel knew Mr. Brown was being nice, at least that's what he was attempting, but his niceness rankled. Why did people keep asking her that? Did she really look that miserable? Girl, you do. You look so fucking depressed, bitch. You look like you have no self-esteem. I'm fine. I just thought I'd go for a walk. Another walk? Mr. Brown raised his eyebrows, which were full and bushy. Didn't you get your fill of exercise last night? No, well... I just wanted some fresh air. Ah, yes, the air is very fresh around here, if nothing else. Max a nice change from the city. Or so I say, like I've not lived here for almost 30 years. You used to live in the city? Ethel didn't mean to take an interest. She didn't want to carry this conversation out longer than it had to, but she couldn't help herself. She'd only ever seen Mr. Brown as her teacher, an authority figure who existed solely to tell her what to do, and more often than not, what not to do. She'd never thought about his past before. Why should she? It hadn't been all that long ago that Ethel had been a child. She hadn't realised that other people actually had lives of their own, that the world didn't revolve so all around her, and her aching desire to be accepted by the cool girls in her class, who went horse riding and had sleepovers and braided one onto another's hair. One another's hair. Oh, aye. Mr. Brown answered casually with a small smile. I lived in Glasgow. I was born there, born and bred. You can hear it in my accent. It comes out from time to time. But that's not here nor there. You do look very pale, Ethel. You aren't coming down with something, are you? Ethel thought back of the cherry pie she had eaten, which had been flecked with mould and her stomach churned. She didn't think that could have done her health many favours, but surely that hadn't been enough to make her seriously sick. She should put it from her mind. I'm fine. I just wanted to stretch my legs, like I said. So you said. My wife was like that. She was a very outdoorsy person. She was always going off on little jaunts out into the countryside and on hikes. Mr. Brown's voice trailed away and he shook his head. I hope you didn't get caught up in all that awful rain yesterday, at least. I got a bit damp, but I was fine. Were you able to get back home in time? Not quite. I had to take shelter in the church, at least up after that. That's just as well. I'm glad you didn't get too drenched, or worse, that you fell and broke something. I was worried about that, actually. You were worrying about me? Of course I was. I thought it was awful late to go on a walk, and it started coming down so hard, too. I was afraid you might have gotten yourself hurt, a wee lass like yourself. Ethel knew Mr. Brown meant well, but she had to stifle a snort in the face of this last remark. She was a lass, yes, but there was nothing particularly wee about her. She was a little lot older than she had been, and she'd gotten taller. Though Mr. Brown was still taller than she was. Thank you, but I'm not hurt. You don't need to worry. Yes, I can see that. I'm glad of it. It's clear you know how to look after yourself. Yes. Well, Ethel thought. I am 21. I'm not a child. I'll try to stop hectoring. I'm not your father, and I'm not your teacher anymore either. It's not my place to fuss. It's just force of habit, I guess. You said you went to the church last night, though? What? Oh, yes, I did. Is there a problem with that? Not really, no. It's just... Mr. Brown shifted, adjusting his grip on Sparky's leash as he did. His dog yipped in response and nuzzled his nose against Mr. Brown's trouser leg. Mr. Brown smiled at this, his expression tender as he said, Yes, Sparky, we'll be on our way in a minute. It's just... Mr. Brown frowned. Then he sighed. It might be nothing, but I've heard some strange things about the church at night is all. And the forest too, come to think of it. Strange things? Aye, that's right. I've never seen anything myself. I don't go into the woods after dark. But some of my friends from the running club, they've said, well, it sounds like a lot of silly superstitions, really. I don't know if I put too much stock in it, but they said there's been some odd goings-on by the church in the early hours. Such as... Oh, you know, it's all the usual stuff. They said they heard noises, I suppose. Strange whispers and the like. I was sceptical myself. I thought it must have been down to some small animals, rabbits or the like. But they were rather insistent that something's going on in the forest. I can't say I've ever heard anything out of the ordinary myself. But like I said, I don't go there at night. It seems like a trip to the emergency room waiting to happen, what with how uneven the ground is. Especially during the winter. It's not safe. But not because of any bugbears or ghouls and goblins and what have you. And there is that Delaney girl. Well, of course, how could Ethel forget about her? She'd never met the girl, yet she hung around Oxbury like a ghost. It was impossible to forget her. It had been much the same when Chloe, what's her name, had gone missing, more than a decade prior. But Ethel had been in primary school then. She hadn't really understood the significance of a teenage girl, only 14 or 15, sneaking out of her parents' home late at night and disappearing without a trace within the woods. Well, Ethel said without a trace, but more of Chloe had been found than the nameless Miss Delaney. They had found one of her shoes almost 6 months after her disappearance, deep in the woods, half buried beneath the leaves. If you keep a good head on your shoulders, I'm sure you'll be fine. You're too old for me to tell you what to do, but do be careful. I'd hate to have to explain to your parents when they got back what you're doing in the hospital with a broken leg, or worse. Mr. Brown's words were light, but Ethel rather got the feeling that there was something more to his warnings than he was letting on. His tone seemed a bit too irreverent, in a manner which wasn't at all like his usual staid, serious style of speech. Did Mr. Brown set more store on ghouls and goblins than he wanted Ethel to think? A cold wind blew, disturbing Ethel's braids. The temperature was low enough that it made Ethel's fingers tense like claws, buried though they were in her pockets. Her teeth, meanwhile, were chattering. But this wasn't necessarily from the cold. Maybe there was something ominous about the woods, Ethel thought she had felt it herself. The uneasy feeling of invisible eyes trained upon her. But that was all her imagination. There wasn't anything dangerous lurking in the woods, not really. Or was there? Or was there? Woo! Ethel made slow progress as she walked through the woods, her passage impeded by how muddy and uneven the terrain was. I think we'll stop at the 3-hour mark. For about 20 more minutes or so. It had rained too much the night prior, and the forest suffered from it. The earth a cacophony of dun, brown wood, loose leaves, and fallen foliage. The heavy rainfall had transformed the path through the forest into a veritable quagmire. Ethel didn't have any hiking boots. She didn't go outside often enough to justify it, and she had been forced to settle for her trainers. Only thing in the woods is the mysterious kissing girl this far. Yeah, she totally isn't dangerous. Yeah, no. She probably isn't a problem. Like, it's probably fine. It's probably fine, guys. Her trainers were relatively sturdy, but the heels went particularly thick, and they sunk into the mud with every single step she took. Ethel tried to go as carefully as she could. She knew that she was clumsy and she didn't want to take a spill when the ground was so muddy. But she still stumbled on several occasions. During one particularly anxiety-inducing moment, her right foot caught in a tree root, and she very nearly toppled into the dirt. Fortunately, the tree trunk, which the aforementioned root had been attached to, was in the immediate vicinity, and Ethel had been able to use it in order to steady herself. That really had been a close call. Ethel delved even deeper into the woods, the trees sprouting up around her like pagan monuments. Typically, when Ethel went walking in the woods, she would hear the wind through the boughs of the trees and the nocturnal animals, moles and rabbits, snuffling about in the undergrowth. Oxbury's forest never really slept, no matter how late the hour. There was always something to see, and if it was too dark to see, there was always something to hear. Ethel couldn't hear much of anything, however, as she traversed the forest, beyond the squelching sounds of her own footsteps and her nervy inhalations. It was quiet. Perhaps too quiet. There was something eerie about it, but maybe this too could be attributed to the rainfall. It had poured down rather a lot the night prior, so much so the leaves still looked damp from it. The late-night animals with their inquisitive snouts and their scrabbling claws must have been taking refuge still, and in case another storm was brewing. Mr. Brown had said the weather looked clear enough tonight, but how were the animals to know that? It would make sense if they were being skittish. The trees eventually began to thin out, and soon Ethel emerged into the moonlit clearing where St. Catherine's sat. The church didn't exactly loom out of darkness. It wasn't grand enough for that, but it had a somber, reassuringly solid presence regardless. Ethel didn't quite know quite how old the church was, but Rowan was something of a history buff, and he had told her about it once before. Rowan was a hands-on kind of person, unlike Manny, and he spent a lot of his free time going on rambles around Oxbury and the fields which surrounded it. Rowan did etchings of the graves, and he liked to take photos of them, all little grey lozenges which were stained with lichen and crumbling, ever so gently around the edges. The parish council might have dissuaded teenagers from hanging out in the churchyard, for fear they would desecrate the graves and leave cigarette butts strewn in their wake. But Rowan wasn't like that. At 17 years of age, he was one of the kindest, most conscientious teenage boys Ethel knew. Which wasn't saying much, given Rowan was one of the only teenage boys she knew, but still. If Rowan had been there, he could have told her when the church had been constructed down to the exact year. He could have told her about the history of the stained glass window, which Ethel had always thought a curious addition for such a small, humble church. He probably knew when the window had been installed and who it depicted, and he probably could have told her the name of the glazier who had made the damned thing. But Rowan wasn't there. He was in Australia with Lauren and Jude and Manny. And though he'd shared those nuggets of information with Lauren once, she had already forgotten all of it. Ethel felt a brief flicker of guilt over her awful memory. What a callous big sister she was. But all thoughts of Rowan soon dissipated as she took a step towards the church. Its wooden door was ajar. It was only ajar by a small crack, a hair's breadth in fact, but it was enough to instill in Ethel hope anew. Maybe the girl really was there. Was she waiting for her? Ethel pushed the door open just a notch, then slipped inside the church. The sound of the old door opening seemed uncomfortably loud in the near-total silence, and it rent the air quite clumsily. Ethel winced as she heard its low, obnoxious creaking, which sounded like the malcontented rumblings of a mighty whale's stomach. She hadn't wanted to spoil the magic of the girl's singing, but it was too late. The silence had been broken. Ethel knew that the girl would soon turn her head, and she did. The girl turned, her dark hair fluttering half melted into the darkness as though her head was made of shadows. She took a step forward, her skirt swishing, and said, "Ethel! I was wondering if I would see you again, hee. I was getting so bored and lonely waiting for you." "You were?" "Of course I was. I asked if you would see me again, didn't I?" Oh yes, so you did." It was true enough that the girl had asked this during their last meeting, but Ethel hadn't really believed in it. She hadn't thought the girl cared. Why would she? She was beautiful, while Ethel was... "With you here, this old church feels a lot more homey. Now then." The girl took a seat on one of the pews, then patted the empty space beside her. Why'd you sit down? There's an awful lot I'd like to ask you. I'd only managed to scrape the surface last time. You're still such an enigma to me. I could call you Miss Mystery. I think I could say the same about you. I still don't know your name. All in good time. First, I want to ask about you. What's your story? Story? Ethel frowned. I don't think I really have one. Oh, don't be silly. Everybody has a story. You hardly grew out of the ground, did you? Like a turnip? Well, no. Then you must have a story to share. Parents, grandparents, maybe some siblings. Hey. Didn't you say you had a couple of brothers? I do, yeah. Manny and Rowan. They're both younger than me. And? What are they like? Manny is... he's... Well... Ethel paused. How could she put this tactfully? It was hard to talk about her feelings about Manny while trying to maintain a veneer of politeness. But Manny himself wasn't a very polite person. Manny was practically glued to his PC. He had been banned from numerous lobbies for using words he really shouldn't have. Oh! Sir! My goodness, Manny, that's, interesting. And he swore and swaggered around the house as though he owned the place. He pattered about the kitchen barefoot, sometimes shirtless. He talked with his mouth full at the breakfast table, and the only person he ever listened to was Jude. Manny thought everybody else was uncool. Ethel in particular, because she was shy and awkward, and she had awful acne in her last year of secondary school. And because she played the violin. He's a typical teenager. Does that mean he's a pain in the neck? He can be. And what about your other brother? Rowan's lovely. He's not like Manny at all. He's very quiet, actually, and mostly keeps to himself. Mum's been a bit worried about him as it happens. Yeah? Yeah. She thinks he's being bullied at school, maybe, but if he is, you'd never tell. He doesn't like to talk about it. Maybe he's afraid Manny will make fun of him. I thought he was more worried that Mum would make a fuss. But maybe. Teenage boys can be like that. They have a lot of pride. Especially the quiet ones. Some of the boys I'd deal with at school were such wankers. The girl scoffed dismissively, then said, So what about your parents? Didn't you say yesterday you weren't all that close? It's complicated. My mum means well. I know she wants me to be happy, but I don't think she understands what would really make me happy. And I don't think she understands me either. Doesn't she try? She does. She paid for my violin lessons, though she doesn't see the point in classical music. She says it's boring. And she was supportive when I said I wanted to study English Lit. She didn't try to make me change my mind. Not like some people's parents would have. She didn't tell me I should study something useful instead, like mathematics or medicine or, I don't know, physics. But she didn't seem to really get it either. I take it your mother doesn't read a lot then? She doesn't read at all, unless you count women's magazines. I thought I was just constipated, but then I gave birth in toilet bowl. Those sorts of magazines? Ethel nodded. My mother and I aren't very alike. I gathered. She doesn't sound like the sensitive sort, not like you. Do you think I'm sensitive? It's the impression I'm getting, yeah. I mean, you stuck around to listen to me singing. It sounds like your mother would have told me to shut up, that I was giving her a headache. I don't think she would have said that. My mother isn't cruel, though Lauren could be blunt. Lauren had made many careless remarks about Ethel's appearance before. Quips to the tune of, God, you aren't going to go out dressed like that, are you? Ethel knew that Lauren didn't mean any ill by it. She was probably trying to show an interest in her only daughter, but sometimes the way her mother looked at her hurt. Lauren was nice to Ethel because Ethel was her daughter. But Ethel knew that if her mother had been one of her peers, a Shania or an Imogene or a Morgan back in school, she would have teased her relentlessly. Lauren, with her peroxide blonde hair and her French manicured nails, had probably made any number of frumpy, unfashionable girls cry when she'd been a student. Lauren might never have made a conscious effort to upset her only daughter, but she definitely made Ethel cry on more than one occasion. Cruel or not, it doesn't sound like she takes much of an interest in you. We just like different things. It happens. We might be related, but that doesn't mean we'll have similar interests. And what is she into then? Love Island and TikTok, mostly. Love Island? It's a reality TV show. It's awful. The contestants are all horrid, but I think that's why my mother likes it so much. I tried watching it with her, but it felt like gawping at animals in a zoo. Or gladiators in an Olympic Coliseum, out for one another's blood. Right. So your mum's hopeless. And your dad? He's your typical dad, I guess? Meaning? He likes football and Formula 1, and his favourite band is Iron Maiden. He does woodworking and DIY, and he can play the guitar too. Oh, so he's a creative then? In a way. He was in a couple of local bands when he was younger, but they never went anywhere. I don't think he resents it though, he was just having fun. Dad asked me once before why I bothered practicing the violin so much, when it was obvious I'd never get anywhere with it. He didn't. He did. He said if he'd not been able to get anywhere with his bands, there's no way I'd be able to make it. I mean, he was playing punk and I'm doing classical, so... He shouldn't have said that, whether he's right or not. It's uncalled for. Some people like to perform for their own sake. You don't need to be popular to make your pursuits worthwhile. That's what I said, and Dad said it was a good thing I got something out of the hideous screeching my violin made. Because he sure as hell didn't. Wow. He sounds like an asshole. He's just insensitive. He isn't that bad, really. He was rude about your hobbies, no, your passions. I think that's plenty bad, especially coming from your father. I thought parents were supposed to support their children. There are lots of different parents in this world and a lot of different children. I don't think I'm quite what either my mother or my father wanted. Yeah. Well, parents can't choose their kids, but kids can't choose their parents either. I doubt you would have been stuck with them if you could decide, would you? Well... Ethel thought of her real parents. The neatly groomed Lauren and the wannabe rocker Jude. Then she thought of the parents she had imagined for herself while growing up. A sweet, sensitive couple who appreciated the arts and who encouraged Ethel in her musical pursuits. She thought of the upbringing she could have had. A Parisian apartment which overlooked Avenue Montaigne, and sighed wistfully. I guess not. I thought as much. Your folks sound rotten. They're not so bad, but it is nice. Being able to talk about my interests with somebody who seems to care. Well, of course I care. Why wouldn't I? The girl pouted, adopting the tempestuous tone of a Celtic warrior queen of centuries past. And I think with that, we will end for today. Oh. Yeah, we'll save here. There we go. I think that's how we will end. Thank you for joining me, guys. It was a lot of fun. I'm enjoying the story a lot. I'm sure this girl is definitely not dangerous. She is definitely not going to, like, do something to us horrific. She definitely she probably hasn't even, like, done it to us already, you know? Let's see who we can raid into. We haven't raided into Tempe in a while. She's playing 7 Days to Die. I'm not familiar with this game. I assume it's like a survival game. Let's go support her. What raid message do I want to get? Thank you for the stream. She seems totally fine. Honest, give her the car keys. Right? I think she's fine. Raid message. I want to think of something for from the game. Raid message. Okay, here's a fun one. The raid message is wanker. You can add emojis if you want to. I've decided that we're going to do raid messages that are like bits from the games we play, just to really throw people off. Because I know that raid messages are always often like space team checking in, lots of emotes and stuff like that. But I think it's really funny to just grab bits from the game and have people be absolutely baffled. Let's just call okay, we're going to raid Tempe and we're all going to say wanker, okay? We got this, chat. We got this. It's perfect. Well, thank you again for joining me, everyone. I appreciate it a lot, and I will try and get the schedule up earlier than I did this week. Uwu. Bye bye!